Abyssal relativism is the terrifying idea that the deeper you dig into truth, the more it dissolves beneath your feet. At first, it might sound like ordinary relativism, the notion that truth is subjective, or that what's true for one person might not be for another. But this philosophy doesn't stop at disagreement or perception. It goes deeper. It whispers that even the idea of truth itself is a mirage, a vanishing point that collapses the moment it's touched. Every belief, no matter how sacred or scientific, is built upon layers of contradiction so vast they could drown a mind that looks too closely. Abyssal relativism. This is not just a philosophical trick. It is a psychological abyss. Imagine questioning your own values only to discover they were borrowed. Imagine peeling away the assumptions of your culture, your education, your logic, only to find that none of them stand alone. Abyssal relativism is not about doubting facts. It's about uncovering that even doubt is infected by the very system it questions. There's no vantage point from which to look at truth objectively. Every framework is held up by another framework, which is held up by another, until all you see is a collapsing spiral of justification, contradiction, and paradox. It's like trying to measure water with a ruler made of ice. As you lower it into the surface, it melts, warps, and disappears. You can feel something is there. You can almost touch it. But it escapes definition the moment you try to hold it still. In this worldview, certainty is not just rare, it is impossible. And worse, the more certain someone sounds, the more dangerous they probably are. Because anyone who claims to have solid ground in a sea of mirrors has likely mistaken their reflection for the truth. What makes abyssal relativism so disturbing is that it doesn't just challenge what you believe. It strips you of the right to ever be sure again. It reveals that language is circular, meaning is fluid, and identity is built on scaffolding that doesn't touch the ground. To live with this awareness is to walk through fog knowing there is no shore. There is only movement, shadow, and the haunting sense that every truth is secretly eating itself from the inside out. Anomalous monism. Anomalous monism is the unnerving belief that the mind and body are one and the same, but the mind refuses to play by any of the physical rules. At its core, it says that every thought, emotion, and experience is a physical event. Your heartbreak is neurons firing. Your joy is a chemical surge. Your memories are tangled networks of electric pulses. But here's the twist. The way these mental events unfold can never, and will never, be captured by any fixed physical law. Science can predict the trajectory of a rocket, the decay of an isotope, the orbit of a planet. But it cannot predict how grief will take shape in one person versus another. It cannot compress love into a formula or code the mind like a machine. Because even though the mind is the body, it behaves in ways the body never could. It's like a storm made of water that refuses to be modeled. The water is ordinary, but the storm? The storm is wild, irregular, and alive. Anomalous monism breaks the comforting illusion that we are understandable. It denies both the dualist's dream of a separate soul and the reductionist's fantasy of a calculable brain. It traps us between two worlds, declaring that our thoughts are real, physical things, while also asserting that no scientific framework will ever be able to fully explain them. We are biological machines haunted by unprogrammable code. We speak, love, cry, and rage, all through matter that won't obey any rulebook. Imagine watching a marionette move on stage, its every motion tied to visible strings. Now imagine those strings suddenly vanish, yet the puppet still moves, dances, weeps. That's what anomalous monism feels like. It tells us we are strings and wood, but the dance we perform defies the laws that govern our very components. It's the idea that cause and effect govern every neuron, but intention, will, and meaning leak out the sides, like heat from a machine that was never meant to feel. This philosophy tears open a wound in the heart of science and asks a terrifying question. If the mind is physical, Why does it refuse to behave like everything else that is? And if we are only matter, why does our matter scream with meaning no equation can hold? Epistemological Nihilism. Epistemological nihilism is the silent scream at the heart of human consciousness, the belief that knowledge is not just flawed or limited, but an illusion so complete it devours itself. It's not that we know too little, it's that we know nothing, and worse, we cannot even be sure what knowing means. It begins as a whisper. What if every belief is built on assumptions that cannot be proven? What if reason itself is just a closed loop, spinning endlessly inside a mind that was never meant to understand the universe around it? This philosophy doesn't merely challenge facts. It goes deeper. It dissolves the foundation of fact itself. Under epistemological nihilism, every claim collapses under scrutiny, because to validate knowledge requires another layer of knowledge, which itself needs justification, and so on forever. It's an infinite staircase where each step crumbles as it's taken. Logic, perception, memory, even mathematics, all become suspect. Every system used to explain the world is built from within the same flawed consciousness it tries to escape. There is no outside vantage point, no higher ground to climb to. Everything we grasp at is made of smoke that vanishes in our hands. Imagine waking up and realizing that every book you've ever read, every teacher you've ever trusted, every thought you've ever had, might be wrong, not because of error, but because of the impossibility of certainty itself. That even this very realization might be false. Epistemological nihilism is not skeptical in the way of science. It does not hope for better evidence or improved understanding. It declares the entire project of knowing to be hollow. It is a black hole where questions go in, but no answers ever come out. This idea can drive a person to madness or liberation. For some, it's the most terrifying abyss, to float in a world where truth has no anchor, no map, no compass. For others, it's a strange freedom. If nothing can be truly known, then no authority has final power, no dogma holds weight, and no system can claim your mind. But the danger is always there, a creeping sense that reality is a language we were never meant to speak, and that everything we think we know is just a dream murmured in a dialect that doesn't exist. Antenatal Calvinism. Antenatal Calvinism is a bleak and merciless fusion of two of humanity's darkest beliefs, that birth is a curse, and that damnation is predetermined. It begins with the brutal proposition of Calvinism, that before a child takes its first breath, its fate is already sealed. Some are chosen, most are condemned. Salvation is not earned, it is decided. Now twist that with antinatalism, the belief that existence itself is suffering, and that bringing life into the world is an unforgivable act. The result is a worldview where birth is not a miracle, but the beginning of a divine betrayal. This philosophy offers no comfort, no escape, no redemption. It tells the newborn, "You were damned before you were even conceived." It whispers to the parent, "Your choice to create life was not a gift, but a sentence." It speaks with the voice of a cold, indifferent cosmos, one where morality doesn't matter, effort is meaningless, and the very act of living is proof that the universe has turned its back. It is not merely pessimistic, it is apocalyptic, and it is final. Antenatal Calvinism doesn't rage, it mourns. It sees cemeteries as kinder than cradles. It sees silence as more merciful than lullabies. And it sees the unborn as the only ones who have truly escaped the wrath of a cosmic order that punishes without cause and selects without reason. In this worldview, the soul is not a candle to be lit, but a wick that is better left untouched. It sees free will as a cruel illusion dangled above the heads of those already sinking. There is no rebellion in this philosophy, only resignation. It teaches that to procreate is to gamble with another soul's eternal suffering, a game rigged by a divine hand that shows no mercy. And so the only moral act becomes refusal. The refusal to bring a child into a world where salvation is rationed, where pain is guaranteed, and where even the most innocent may be born cursed for no other reason than that they were born at all. It does not cry out for justice. It assumes there never was any. And in that chilling silence, it finds its only truth, that the most sacred act in a world like this is to not create another victim. Ontological Indeterminacy. Ontological indeterminacy is the unsettling belief that reality itself cannot decide what it is. It is not that we don't understand the world, but that the world doesn't fully understand itself. This philosophy dares to suggest that some things do not just lack clarity, they lack a fixed identity altogether. A chair may be a chair in one context, but in another it begins to blur into something else, a sculpture, a tool, a memory, a symbol. And beneath all these meanings lies a terrifying truth. Maybe there never was a single, stable thing to begin with. The essence of ontological indeterminacy is this: what something is depends not on its substance, but on the shifting web of perspectives surrounding it. There is no pure being, no definitive label, no final state. Everything is smeared across probabilities, across contradictions, across a haze of partial truths. Objects flicker at the edges of comprehension. Identities bleed into one another, and categories crack under the weight of complexity they cannot hold. The world becomes less a puzzle and more a hallucination, held together by collective insistence. It's like watching a shadow move and realizing it doesn't belong to anything. You try to trace it back to a form, but the form keeps changing. Every time you think you've grasped what something is, you find another angle, another exception, another definition that contradicts the last. Language fails. Logic stutters. Meaning trembles. And somewhere deep inside, your mind begins to sense that even your own identity, your own name, your own body, might not be as fixed as you once believed. This idea is not just metaphysical, it's existential. If the things around us cannot be clearly defined, then what are we really holding on to? What are we trusting, labeling, worshiping, fearing? If being itself is indeterminate, then truth becomes a ghost that wears too many faces to recognize. Morality, purpose, knowledge, they all float in a fog where the edges are never clean. And perhaps the most disturbing thought of all, maybe the universe is not hiding a deeper truth beneath appearances. Maybe the appearances are all there is, unstable, overlapping, and always slipping away before they can be named. Cryptophenomenology. Cryptophenomenology is the haunting philosophy that claims the deepest truths of reality are not just hidden, they are designed to be unknowable. At first glance, it might sound like phenomenology, the study of how we experience the world through consciousness. But cryptophenomenology goes further, dragging experience into the shadows. It whispers that what we see, feel, and think is only a surface illusion stretched across a chasm of silence. Beneath every sensation is a locked chamber of reality we will never access, not because we haven't tried hard enough, but because the door was never meant to open. This philosophy doesn't accuse the world of being meaningless. That would be simple. Instead, it suggests something far more disturbing, that meaning exists, but it is encrypted, scrambled in a language that human consciousness was never built to read. Every time we grasp for clarity, we are decoding a message that's been deliberately garbled. Our senses, our emotions, our thoughts, they are like flickering candles in a cave with walls that absorb all truth before it can echo back. Cryptophenomenology is not just philosophical, it's existentially disorienting. Imagine falling in love and knowing that the emotion you feel is only a shadow of a deeper experience your mind cannot translate. Imagine grieving and realizing that your sorrow is a muffled echo of something far more immense, something that can never be named. In this world, experience is real, but hollowed out. Our minds are radio receivers tuned to the wrong frequency. We hear the static. We feel the rhythm, but the message never comes. And so we continue to interpret, to assign meaning, to build theories, to dream of understanding. But every interpretation is like carving statues out of fog. Cryptophenomenology suggests that all of philosophy may be a hallucination of progress, that even our attempts to understand ourselves are scripted by forces that have already hidden the code. It is a worldview of deep paralysis, where knowledge is not simply elusive, but deliberately obscured by the very nature of consciousness itself. It doesn't matter if we look outward to the stars or inward to the soul. Everywhere we turn, the answer is hidden beneath the veil. And the most devastating part? We can feel that there's something there. We just can't touch it. Pansychic Solipsism. Pansychic Solipsism is the eerie union of two haunting beliefs: that everything is conscious and that only one consciousness truly exists. It begins with the ancient intuition of panpsychism, the belief that every atom, every stone, every blade of grass has a flicker of awareness. But then it twists into solipsism, the idea that your mind is the only one that actually exists. In this hybrid vision, every object around you seems to shimmer with life, yet all that life is merely a splinter of you. You are not just the observer of the world, you are the source of its consciousness, fractured into endless reflections. This philosophy does not suggest the world is dead. On the contrary, it suggests that the universe is too alive, but with your mind bleeding into everything. The trees do not think like you, because they are not separate from you. The air does not whisper because it has its own voice. It whispers because your mind is echoing through it. It is the self, multiplied into 1,000 forms, none of which can speak back with true independence. There are no strangers. There is only you, wearing different masks. Panpsychic solipsism is not a celebration of connection. It is a descent into isolation disguised as unity. It means that when you talk to others, you are speaking to fragments of yourself. Every smile you see, every tear you witness, every act of cruelty or kindness, they are yours. Not symbolically, not emotionally, literally. The people you love, aspects of you. The people who hurt you, parts of you you cannot control. It's like living in a dream where the dream refuses to end, and every character, every object, every law of physics is being held together by your own awareness, without your consent. There is no escape in this philosophy. There is no other to reach out to. You can scream into the sky, but the sky is made of your scream. You can fall to your knees for mercy, but the God you beg to is just your own subconscious, dressed in divine robes. This is not spiritual oneness. It is psychic claustrophobia, the unbearable sense that you are everywhere, and yet completely alone. Recursive Theodicy. Recursive Theodicy is the philosophical Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail in a desperate attempt to explain why suffering exists under the watch of a supposed all-powerful, all-loving God. It begins with the classic question: if God is good and all-powerful, why is there evil? But unlike traditional theodicies that seek to resolve the contradiction, recursive theodicy answers the question by repeating it in different forms, again and again, like a divine riddle with no exit. It suggests that evil is necessary because it reveals good, but then, terrifyingly, insists that good must also exist to make sense of evil. And so, good justifies evil, and evil justifies good, in an endless loop of moral justification where every horror is explained by hope, and every hope depends on horror to be meaningful. Pain is not just permitted, it becomes the very proof of love. Death is not a flaw, it is the backdrop that makes life seem sacred. The more agony the world holds, the more profound the divine mystery becomes. Imagine a child dying, and the answer offered is not comfort, but a philosophical spiral, that her suffering teaches others compassion, that compassion reveals grace, that grace reveals God, and that God permits the child's death so others may know him. Now ask, is this justice or just recursion disguised as meaning? Recursive Theodicy never lands. It floats, deflects, circles. It offers reasons for suffering that themselves require suffering to make sense. The logic becomes so tightly wound that it begins to resemble a trap. This philosophy does not deny God. It cages him in infinite mirrors. He allows evil to prove he can overcome it. He creates brokenness so he can be the healer. He sets fire to the world and then says, "Behold how brightly I shine through the smoke." It is divinity through contradiction, love proven through torment, mercy born only in the presence of wrath. And it never ends, because every attempt to question God's justice becomes another opportunity to justify his justice through the question itself. Recursive theodicy doesn't offer comfort. It offers a mechanism, a spiritual machine that turns grief into theology and tears into doctrine. But deep down, behind the polished logic, something darker flickers. The fear that the suffering never ends because it's needed to keep the whole system spinning. Eternal recurrence of the unconscious. Eternal recurrence of the unconscious is the disturbing belief that the parts of you cannot face, your repressed fears, traumas, desires, do not disappear. They return, again and again, not just in dreams or behaviors, but across lifetimes, generations, and entire histories. It is a philosophy that says the unconscious does not forget. It waits. Beneath the surface of your identity, something ancient watches in silence. And every time you push it away, it finds another door. This is not the peaceful idea of reincarnation. It is psychological haunting. A soul caught in repetition, not of memory, but of wounds. You may think you've grown, healed, evolved. But if you've only buried the truth deeper, then it will rise again. In the way your voice trembles at certain names. In the way your relationships collapse into the same pattern. In the way your child mirrors your pain without knowing your past. It is not karma. It is architecture. The unconscious lays bricks across time, building the same house until it is finally confronted. This philosophy does not ask what happens after death. It asks what refuses to die. It says that until you face the part of you that remains hidden, it will keep looping, changing form, changing face, but always returning. Maybe in your next life, you'll be the one who causes the pain you once endured. Maybe your silence becomes someone else's scream. Maybe the nightmare you thought you escaped is now walking in someone else's skin. The unconscious, in this view, is not personal. It's trans-temporal. It spills over time, over identity, over bloodlines. You cannot kill what you do not see. And in eternal recurrence of the unconscious, this is the curse. You carry a ghost that only appears when your defenses are down. A word, a smell, a face. Then it rises. You panic. You retreat. And the loop continues. The same emotional weather. The same internal war. It is your unfinished business, your secret mythology, your ancestral grief wrapped in new stories. And the more you run, the more it learns how to find you. There is no salvation in denial, because in this philosophy, what you refuse to face is exactly what you are doomed to become. Again, and again, and again. Quantum Eschatology. Quantum eschatology is the most unsettling marriage of physics and prophecy, a vision of the end of the universe where finality itself fractures. It begins with a question no religion, no science, no philosopher has ever truly settled. What happens at the end? But quantum eschatology doesn't answer with fire, with heaven, with entropy, or silence. It answers with uncertainty. Uncertainty so profound that it bends the very fabric of death, time, and identity. In this philosophy, the end is not a singular event. It is a spectrum of infinite endings, each one shaped by the mind that observes it. At its core lies the idea that consciousness influences reality not just in life, but in death. That the collapse of the quantum wave function, the mechanism by which possibilities become facts, continues at the threshold of the ultimate question: how do we die? But in quantum eschatology, that question fractures. One version of you dies in a car crash, another walks away unharmed. One fades into unconsciousness, another wakes up in a different reality. And each version is real, because the collapse happens differently depending on what is observed and by whom. This isn't a metaphor. This is the implication buried in the math of quantum mechanics. The possibility that reality is not fixed, that endings are not final, and that the eschaton, the end of all things, might never be one thing at all. For every apocalypse, a survival. For every oblivion, a continuation. It isn't comfort, it's chaos. It means that death may be observer relative, that your universe may keep going even if another ends. It means salvation, destruction, rebirth. All of them might be true, depending on the path your consciousness follows. And it gets darker. Because if there are infinite endings, there are also infinite ways to suffer, to survive, to repeat, to awaken. It suggests that judgment may not be divine, but quantum, that your awareness shifts endlessly to timelines where you didn't die, where you face another challenge, another collapse, another version of the end. In this model, the apocalypse is personal. The afterlife is a branching path of probability, and there is no final word, only infinite echoes of what if. Quantum eschatology doesn't end the world. It multiplies it, and in that multiplication, it erases any certainty that death is the end, or that anything ends at all. Retrocausal free will. Retrocausal free will is the radical and mind-bending belief that your choices not only shape the future, but also reshape the past. It is not enough to say that decisions ripple forward in time. This philosophy claims that your acts of will reach backward, altering the very conditions that led you here. Your current moment isn't the product of history, it's the author of it. The future decides the past, and the more conscious your decision, the more reality rewrites itself to align with it. At first glance, this feels impossible. How can the future reach into yesterday? But quantum physics has long hinted at time's strange flexibility. Retrocausality is not just a poetic metaphor. It is the cold suggestion that under certain conditions, effects can precede their causes, that particles can be influenced after their actions. Now imagine that principle applied to consciousness. Your will does not simply respond to what happened, it updates what happened, as if reality were a script rewritten with every decision you fully embody. Retrocausal. Free will destroys the illusion that you are a victim of linear time. It says that the trauma, the mistake, the inherited curse may not be fixed. That if your will is strong enough, if it comes from deep enough, it can ripple backward and transform the sequence. The parent who abandoned you, the door that never opened, the failure that shaped your identity. This philosophy does not pretend those events didn't happen. It claims their meaning, their emotional architecture, and even their material context can be rewritten when your will becomes more real than your memory. It's not manifestation, it's not prayer. It's something colder, deeper, and more terrifying. It means every time you made a choice and followed through with conviction, the timeline behind you cracked and reformed to support it. The cause becomes the effect. The effect becomes the cause. And suddenly, what you thought was inevitable begins to feel optional, selected not by what happened, but by who you decided to become. Your past is no longer a prison. It is a negotiation, updated in real time by the strength of your intent. But this power comes at a price. If you can alter the past through will, then every moment you hesitate, every choice you abandon, is a rewrite that never happens. And somewhere, in the depths of reality, The version of you who chose otherwise is still waiting to be born. Hauntological Determinism. Hauntological determinism is the chilling belief that the present is not shaped by the past, but by futures that never came. It claims that we are not simply haunted by what once was, but by what could have been. That our lives, our choices, even our identities, are ghost-anchored to alternate realities that were aborted before they ever took form. In this philosophy, determinism does not flow in one direction. It loops, it flickers, it echoes. And what controls the now is not just the weight of history, but the gravitational pull of futures that failed to materialize. It begins as a strange sensation, the feeling that something is missing from the room, even though nothing is out of place. A career you didn't choose, a love that never arrived, a version of you that should exist, but doesn't. These unrealized futures hang in the air like smoke, warping the path forward without ever stepping into view. Hauntological determinism says these ghosts do shape your life. They do leave fingerprints, and no matter how much you try to forget them, they remember you. Every action becomes a reaction to an absence. Every decision is a negotiation with the invisible. You don't just move through time, you move through the debris of futures you were never allowed to live. And the terrifying part is that these futures were once possible. They were close enough to feel, close enough to imagine. But something, fate, society, fear, clipped their wings before they could manifest. And yet, their influence persists, like phantom limbs you still try to move. This philosophy doesn't offer freedom. It traps the present in a fog of loss. It whispers that who you are today is merely a default setting, chosen not because it was right, but because everything else was denied. Even joy feels haunted, because you know it was supposed to arrive differently. Even your pain feels like an echo of something more precise, more earned, more real. And every time you try to change, to pivot, to become something new, the ghost of the unchosen future tightens its grip. Hauntological determinism is not about memory. It's about mourning futures you were never allowed to remember. Futures that shape your life from the shadows, not by what they gave, but by what they never had the chance to take. Zero identity theory. Zero identity theory is the chilling idea that no one, not a single person, has ever had a continuous, unified self. Not you, not your parents, not the stranger passing by. What you call yourself is just a momentary flicker, a passing arrangement of thoughts and memories that tricks itself into feeling like a permanent entity. But there is no thread, no core, no center, only snapshots, only masks, only a temporary pattern pretending to be a soul. This philosophy does not argue that the self is complex. It argues that the self is non-existent, that what you felt as a child, what you feel now, and what you'll feel on your deathbed are not connected by any true identity. They are different mental organisms, housed in the same body, each assuming they are you, because they've inherited just enough residue from the last one to feel familiar. But that familiarity is an illusion, just a biological trick, just memory acting as glue where there is no actual continuity. Zero identity theory rips apart the most sacred illusion in human life, that you are someone. That there's a permanent I moving through time, growing, learning, overcoming. In this view, every time you fall asleep and wake up, someone new opens their eyes. Every time you change your mind, it's because a new version of you has taken over. You are not growing. You are being replaced, over and over again, by entities that look and sound like you, but aren't. It's like watching an actor play the same role across different scenes, but realizing the actor keeps changing, even though the costume stays the same. You can trick the audience. You can even trick the mirror. But inside, there's no actor left, just a stage of recycled gestures, borrowed lines, and momentary awarenesses that vanish as quickly as they appear. This theory doesn't deny that experience happens. It just says it never happens to anyone. Emotions, thoughts, perceptions, they exist. but they belong to no one. They rise, they fall, and they dissolve, unclaimed, unanchored, drifting through a biological vessel that keeps insisting, "This is me." But there is no me. Only echoes, only flashes, only ghosts passing through a name. Anthropic Schizophrenia. Anthropic schizophrenia is the fractured belief that the universe cannot decide which version of reality is true, because every conscious observer splits it further apart. It takes the anthropic principle, the idea that the universe seems eerily fine-tuned for conscious life, and infects it with a terrifying instability. That consciousness itself is too powerful, too inconsistent, and too divided to allow for a stable universe. Every act of awareness becomes a fault line. Every thought carves a new branch in the fabric of existence. The result is not one cosmos, but a schizophrenic multiverse, splintering endlessly under the weight of perception. It starts with a question. Why does the universe seem built for human life? The traditional answer is selection bias. We see the universe this way because we exist in it. But anthropic schizophrenia pushes further. It suggests that each observer doesn't just witness the universe, they generate a version of it. Your awareness creates a cosmos that reflects the contours of your consciousness. But so does everyone else. And none of these realities fully agree. The more conscious minds awaken, the more fractured the structure of reality becomes. No single truth can survive the collective clash of incompatible perceptions. This philosophy doesn't just imply subjectivity, it implies ontological collapse. Imagine a billion observers, each projecting their own sliver of the universe into existence. Each sliver obeys different laws, different meanings, different outcomes. Now imagine those slivers trying to coexist. What happens is not harmony, it is distortion, contradiction, and breakdown. The universe begins to suffer from a cosmic form of schizophrenia, splitting not from within, but from the incompatible minds tearing at it from every angle. Every belief you hold, every observation you make, becomes a fracture point. You believe the world is just. Someone else believes it is cruel. In anthropic schizophrenia, both become true, but not in separate minds, in separate universes that exist simultaneously and unresolvably. The multiverse is not a canvas of possibility. It is a mirror cracked by too many reflections. And the most disturbing implication? That truth isn't lost. It never existed in a singular form. The cosmos is not built to contain agreement. It is built to splinter. Built to echo with the voices of minds that can never sync. Built to host a trillion realities, all screaming over each other in perfect, permanent dissonance. Neurophenomenal Idealism. Neurophenomenal idealism is the deeply unsettling belief that the world you perceive, everything from stars to sidewalks, from heartbreak to gravity, is not out there, but is entirely created by brain states that have no external reference point. It is a philosophy that does not claim the mind interprets the world. It claims the mind generates it. What you touch, see, and hear does not exist beyond your neural activity. There is no reality behind the curtain, only the illusion of one, rendered with perfect fidelity by a brain that has mistaken its own simulation for truth. This is not the gentle idealism of dreaming monks or poetic mystics. This is clinical, biological solipsism. It insists that neurons do not merely mirror the world, they invent it. When you see a tree, there is no tree, only the brain's hallucinatory pattern shaped by millions of evolutionary shortcuts, encoded associations, and internal feedback loops. When you fall in love, no other soul is truly present, just your synapses lighting up in a particular rhythm, projecting beauty, connection, and meaning onto a canvas that may be utterly blank. Neurophenomenal idealism is terrifying because it strips away the assumption that something real is holding this experience together. It does not say the world is a dream. It says the world is the brain's dream. running inside a skull that has never touched the thing it claims to know. There are no objects, no laws of physics, no external time. Only phenomenology, experience, and neurons, pulsing in silence, like a blind painter endlessly creating a world it can never see. You walk through life assuming solidity, that the cup in your hand exists, that the people around you are real. But under this view, what you're grasping is only a high-resolution fiction, a story written in gray matter, a masterpiece of internal coherence that never touches anything outside itself, because there is no outside. Not really. And if the brain is damaged, the world collapses. It changes shape. Color bleeds. Time folds. Identity fractures. Because there is no shared reality holding things steady, only the delicate dance of neurochemical signals, choreographing a universe from within. The horror of neurophenomenal idealism is not that the world is fake, but that the entire thing depends on a wet organ that doesn't even know what it's doing. And when it stops firing, the universe it created dies, quietly, completely, and without leaving a trace. Hyperstitional Ethics. Hyperstitional ethics is the dangerous and dazzling belief that morality is not discovered, inherited, or reasoned, but written into reality by belief itself. In this philosophy, ethical systems are not reflections of eternal truths or natural law. They are self-fulfilling fictions, narratives so vividly believed, so powerfully repeated, that they warp behavior, reshape society, and eventually become real. Not because they were always true, but because we believed them hard enough to make them true. This is the core of hyperstition, ideas that become real through the sheer force of belief, like myths that wake up and start rewriting the world. It begins with a lie, or what seems like one. Kindness is stronger than cruelty. Justice always wins. The good will triumph. These aren't proven facts, they are stories. Yet the more people believe them, the more they act accordingly. The world bends around the fiction. Systems are built to protect it. Cultures are forged to sustain it. Over time, the original lie becomes the new truth, not because it was real, but because enough minds insisted that it must be. Ethics, in this model, is a kind of spellcasting. Belief is the incantation, action is the ritual, and reality is the altar that eventually changes shape. But this idea cuts both ways. Just as a beautiful lie can build a better world, a monstrous belief can summon horrors. If enough people believe that certain lives are worthless, laws will reflect it. If enough people believe vengeance is justice, the courts will bleed. Morality becomes a battlefield of competing hyperstitions, some rising, some dying, all trying to overwrite the rules of the real. There is no final arbiter, no universal truth to return to, only the stories that win. Hyperstitional ethics is not for the faint of heart. It offers no comfort in absolute good, no sanctuary in divine command. It says, create the good, or someone else will create the bad. It doesn't wait for meaning, it manufactures it. It doesn't ask, is this right? It asks, can we make this right by believing it is? Every moral code, every revolution, every sacred principle becomes a fiction played into being, or a fiction destroyed by disbelief. The terrifying implication is this: morality is not found. It is written by those bold enough to pretend, long enough, that the lie is already law. Void realism. Void realism is the philosophy that behind every form, every fact, every feeling, there is nothing. Not metaphorical nothing, not poetic stillness, but a literal, unrelenting void. It is the belief that reality, at its core, is hollow. That matter is a mask. That consciousness is a flicker above an abyss. And that the world you think you know, this world of colors, meaning, motion, sensation, is only a temporary surface stretched thin over a blackness that cannot be touched known, or escaped. This philosophy does not say the void is absence. It says the void is more real than anything else, that behind your smile, behind your home, behind every law of physics, there is the void, humming silently like a hidden engine of erasure. Everything you love is temporary. Everything you fear is temporary. Everything you think is real is suspended over a vacuum, and that vacuum is not waiting to swallow you. It already has. The self? A glitch in emptiness. The universe? A spark in collapse. Void. Realism is not passive. It is predatory. It says the void is not just empty space, it is foundational. The more you study reality, the more you find silence. Atoms become probabilities. Objects become waves. Time bends. Language dissolves. Identity fragments. And underneath it all is the same thing, a blank field of non-being that supports every being like a corpse supports a mask. You don't live in the world. You live on top of a void, pretending it's a home. It goes further. It suggests that all attempts at meaning are desperate constructions to distract from the truth, that meaning is fabricated to protect us from the shape of what's really there, which is nothing at all. Not just death, not just non-existence, but a living void that underwrites every heartbeat, every kiss, every prayer. And no matter how much beauty you build, it's all drawn from the same endless vacuum. There is no final truth in void realism. There is only unraveling. The more you look, the less there is. The closer you get, the more the edges blur. It doesn't terrify you with demons or chaos. It terrifies with silence, with absence, with the cold revelation that existence itself is a skin stretched over a hole, and you are the mask it wears. Inverted Platonism. Inverted Platonism is the unsettling reversal of everything classical philosophy tried to promise. An elegant, violent flip that says, what is most real is not the ideal, but the flawed copy. In Plato's world, perfection exists in a higher realm, the perfect circle, the perfect justice, the perfect love. And what we see here in the physical world are mere shadows, distorted reflections of that pure form. But inverted Platonism burns that temple to the ground. It says the forms are the lie. It says the shadows, the smudges, the broken versions, they are the truth. This philosophy doesn't elevate perfection. It buries it. It argues that ideals are just comforting hallucinations we invented to escape the unbearable chaos of the real. The chipped statues, the fractured identities, the crooked relationships. These are not deviations from a higher reality. These are the foundation of reality. In fact, the pursuit of perfection is the ultimate illusion, a narcotic that blinds us from the messy, beautiful violence of what actually exists. Perfection is a ghost, and chasing it is how civilizations go mad. Imagine looking at a crumbling wall and feeling more truth in its decay than in a blueprint of the wall before it was built. Imagine realizing that your failed attempts at love, your awkward silences, your emotional scars, these are not broken reflections of some true love ideal. They are the real thing. They carry more weight, more meaning, because they are lived, not imagined. Inverted Platonism turns the spiritual gaze downward, into the dirt, into the glitch, into the blood-stained fabric of actual life. It doesn't ask what the perfect form of courage is. It asks what courage looks like when you're afraid, alone, and still choose to act. This philosophy is a knife aimed at utopia. It dismantles the false gods of purity, unity, symmetry. It says the crack is more honest than the whole. The copy is more alive than the original, and the broken is more sacred than the ideal. Where Plato sees a world reaching upward toward truth, inverted Platonism sees a world crawling forward through mud, dragging its bruises behind it, daring to say, this is it. Not a dream, not a trial, not a test, just this. And that is enough. Linguistic Cosmogenesis. Linguistic cosmogenesis is the unnerving belief that the universe did not come first, That language did. Not figuratively, not mythologically, but literally. It is the philosophy that before matter, before space, before time, there was a word. And not just any word. A primordial utterance, a raw vibration of meaning so absolute, it cracked the void and gave birth to form. In this worldview, reality is not discovered. It is spoken into being. The cosmos is not a thing that exists independently. It is a sentence still being written. This is not about symbols we attach to objects. It's about the terrifying possibility that language is not a description of reality, but its creator. That the world is not made of atoms, but of syntax. That everything, your body, your memories, the stars above, is built from grammar too ancient and deep to recognize. Every tree is a word. Every death is punctuation. Every moment is a line in a poem written by something that does not need to be alive to speak. Linguistic Cosmogenesis flips the human story inside out. You are not a creature using language. You are a linguistic event performing a self. You are not made of flesh and bone. You are a phrase unfolding in time. When you speak, you don't just communicate. You reshape reality. And every sentence you form is a ripple in the spell that holds the world together. It suggests that language is not a tool of the mind, but the mother of the mind. That consciousness didn't evolve into speech. Speech evolved into you. What if the Big Bang wasn't an explosion, but an enunciation? A word so vast, so powerful, it unfolded into time, light, and matter. What if every scientific law is just an echo of that original command, refracted across dimensions? In this view, even silence is not absence. Silence is the breath before the next word, the pause before another reality emerges. This philosophy haunts because it makes every word sacred, and every lie a wound in the structure of the world. It means slander isn't just immoral, it's destructive. It means language isn't merely how we survive, it's how we exist. And every time a voice is silenced, a corner of the universe forgets itself. Because in the beginning wasn't being. In the beginning was the word, and it's still speaking. Cosmic Pessimism. Cosmic pessimism is not sadness. It is not despair. It is the quiet, terrifying recognition that the universe is indifferent to meaning, and always has been. This philosophy doesn't cry or scream. It simply stares back at the cosmos and whispers, "It was never built for you." It holds no hope for justice, no arc of redemption, no secret plan unfolding behind the scenes. It sees the stars, the galaxies, the birth and death of light, and sees nothing waiting at the end. No reward, no punishment. Just a vast silence that doesn't care whether you loved, suffered, or screamed for help. This isn't nihilism. Nihilism is the collapse of meaning. Cosmic pessimism says, there never was meaning to begin with. It removes the human ego entirely. Your dreams, your beliefs, your suffering, they are not part of some divine narrative. They are not echoes of a higher truth. They are dust, briefly illuminated in the glare of an exploding sun. And still, we go on. Still, we build monuments to values that the universe has never acknowledged. It is a philosophy of surrender, but not to apathy. It is the surrender of a child who realizes the sky doesn't hear its prayers. It is the surrender of someone who stares into the night and finally understands that the stars are not watching, that they never were. Cosmic pessimism doesn't argue that life is bad, only that life isn't special. That humans are not fallen angels or rising gods, but animals with language, hurling questions into a universe that doesn't reply. The horror isn't that we are small. The horror is that nothing out there cares that we are. This philosophy poisons the well of comfort. It untangles every lie we told ourselves to sleep at night. That love redeems. That pain refines. That tragedy has a purpose. That someone, somewhere, is keeping score. Cosmic pessimism says, no one is. There is no scoreboard, no finish line. Only time, grinding everything into silence. And in that silence, the weight of all human longing floats unanswered, forever. Acid Communism. Acid communism is the electrifying, mind-splitting belief that consciousness itself has been colonized, and that only by breaking free of capitalist mental programming through collective psychedelic awakening can humanity reclaim its lost potential. It is not just a political idea, it is a psychological rebellion, a war waged not with guns or policies, but with perception. It claims that the most radical act is not protest, it's liberating the imagination, and that true revolution doesn't begin in the streets, it begins in the mind. This philosophy dares to say that capitalism doesn't just control wealth, it controls reality. It traps people in loops of anxiety, ambition, competition, and despair. It shrinks the imagination down to paycheck sizes and mortgage terms. It poisons the dream space. It turns freedom into branding, love into performance, creativity into commodity. And then it convinces everyone that this is normal, that this is the only way to live. Acid communism rips that lie apart. It says, what if there is no limit to human cooperation? What if we remembered that we can share? What if we could feel each other's suffering and ecstasy? But this remembering, according to acid communism, will not come from textbooks. It will not come from theory alone. It must be felt. Through music, through dance, through collective experience, through altered states of consciousness that tear the ego down and let something bigger speak through the cracks. Psychedelics are not an escape. They're a tool. A crowbar against the steel cage of consumer logic. They dissolve hierarchy. They dissolve separation. They dissolve the illusion that we are alone. Acid communism dreams of a world where work is play, where time belongs to the people, where beauty is free, and where money has no power because everything is already ours. It believes that capitalism has robbed people not just of wealth, but of vision, and that the first step toward emancipation is to remember what it felt like before we were bought, scheduled, and sedated. This philosophy doesn't offer a plan. It offers a rupture, a portal, a trip. It says the future isn't waiting for us to arrive. It's waiting for us to imagine it again. Together, high on connection, drunk on joy, lit up with the unbearable truth that none of this was ever necessary, and that something better has always been possible, if we can just open our minds wide enough to see it. Post-structural Buddhist nihilism. Post-structural Buddhist nihilism is the philosophy that nothing exists, not the self, not the truth, not the path, and not even the absence of those things. It is the scream behind the silence of enlightenment, the collapse not just of ego, but of language, structure, and even negation itself. It begins in Buddhism's radical insight that the self is an illusion, a flickering dream with no core. But it doesn't stop there. Post-structuralism enters like a blade and tears apart even the systems used to describe that illusion. The result is a philosophy that doesn't merely empty the world, it empties the emptiness. At first, there's peace in realizing the self is not fixed. That suffering is born from attachment. That freedom lies in letting go. But then the ground keeps falling. The teachings themselves become suspect. The sutras are made of words. The words are made of signs. The signs refer to other signs. There is no final anchor, just an endless echo of concepts circling a void. Enlightenment becomes just another narrative. The teacher is another mask. The silence becomes a performance. And the performer isn't real either. Post-structural Buddhist nihilism tears through the heart of spiritual practice. It says that liberation, too, is a construct. That the idea of transcending illusion is itself an illusion. That truth and falsehood, path and delusion are part of the same language game, and all games collapse in the end. There is no ladder to climb, no summit to reach, no Buddha waiting with a final answer. Just a vast dance of emptiness, wearing the face of meaning. The mind tries to fight back, to rebuild, to say, well then, non-existence is the truth. But even that collapses, because non-existence is still a concept, still a structure, still a point in the system. This philosophy offers no foundation, no ground. Not even the groundlessness is stable. You are not real. Your thoughts are not real. Your liberation is not real. And your realization of all this is just another ripple in the dream. It does not comfort. It does not guide. It dismantles. It strips the world of all sacred stories and leaves only the raw, flickering hallucination of being. An echo that cannot stop echoing, even though there's nothing left to say. Temporal Objectivism. Temporal Objectivism is the strange and jarring belief that the future is not a possibility. It is a fixed landscape, already written, already real. But not for everyone. In this philosophy, time is not a flowing river, but a frozen structure with specific vantage points visible only to those morally or spiritually aligned with them. The future exists. It is not being created. It is being revealed, selectively. And who gets to see it, feel it, or live it depends on who they are. This idea fractures the way most people understand time. We like to believe the future is unwritten, that our choices shape it as we move forward. Temporal Objectivism stares back and says, no. The future is a building, already built. You are not a builder. You are a visitor. And what floors of that building you're allowed to access depends entirely on your internal architecture, your alignment, your clarity, your truth. In this reality, time does not respond to actions. It responds to essence. This belief has a brutal elegance. It says that some people never experience the future meant for them because they never became the version of themselves who was meant to receive it. Their path remains hidden, not because it doesn't exist, but because they don't match its frequency. It's like a door that won't unlock unless the shape of your soul fits the key. Someone else could walk right through it, not because they were luckier, but because they were ready. Temporal Objectivism makes time personal. It makes it conditional. It does not reward hope. It rewards alignment. And that's where its terror lies. You could be walking through a version of the present that has no bridge to the future you want. Not because you made a mistake, but because you're not yet the person the future is prepared to meet. Your destiny exists, but it does not chase you. You must grow into its gravity. This philosophy turns time into judgment. It's not a blank canvas. It's a mirror. And unless you reflect the truth that time is trying to show you, your future will remain locked in silence, watching, waiting, untouched, as if it were never yours to begin with. Mythic Rationalism. Mythic Rationalism is the philosophy that logic itself is just a highly sophisticated myth, a modern legend we've mistaken for truth. It does not deny the power of reason. It reveres it. But it claims that reason is not a portal to objective reality. It's a cultural construct, a narrative structure, a mythos dressed in equations and arguments. The syllogism replaces the sacred symbol. The theorem takes the place of the god. But underneath both lies the same human hunger: to make sense of the chaos, to pretend there is order, to believe that the world has a structure we can master. This philosophy tells us that what we call rationality is not neutral. It's a story, one with heroes and villains, beginnings and ends, sacred laws and heretical doubts. The rational thinker is the priest of this new mythology. He slays uncertainty with reason like a warrior slaying dragons. He invokes axioms as if they were ancient spells. He builds temples made of data and worships at the altar of proof. But the altar is wood, the temple is stone, and the rituals are no different than the chants and sacrifices of the old religions we thought we'd outgrown. Mythic rationalism does not sneer at logic. It understands its seduction. The clean lines of an argument, the cold beauty of deduction, the comfort of believing that the world can be broken into parts, measured, labeled, and solved. But it warns that this belief is not eternal. It is not objective. It is human. And every human structure has limits. Every myth eventually cracks. Imagine teaching a child that the universe can be understood through numbers. Imagine building cities, machines, ideologies from that belief. Then imagine realizing that the numbers were our own invention, that the logic we use to decode the world is the same logic that created the code. We are myth makers in denial, cloaking our rituals in abstraction, wearing equations like robes, calling our stories systems because we fear admitting how deep the chaos runs. Mythic rationalism forces the mind to confront its own theater. The stories we call scientific, the proofs we trust as divine, the myths we live inside while swearing we've outgrown mythology. And in that confrontation, a terrible question rises. What if logic didn't replace the gods? What if it became one? Nonlinear karma theory. Nonlinear karma theory is the disorienting belief that karma does not move forward in time. It jumps, loops, and collapses across lifetimes and moments with no regard for sequence or logic. It claims that consequences are not chained to the actions that cause them in any linear sense. What you suffer today might be the result of something you haven't done yet. What you're rewarded for now might echo from a future choice you've yet to make. In this philosophy, time is not a road. It's a shattered mirror, reflecting infinite angles at once. Traditional karma comforts people with order. Cause leads to effect, and justice arrives, eventually. But nonlinear karma theory tears that order apart. It tells you that pain can arrive before the sin, and healing can precede the wound. You may fall in love with someone as punishment. You may lose everything as a reward. You may be haunted by guilt for actions you've never taken, but will, or won't. Because time, in this framework, does not deliver karma chronologically. It delivers it energetically. Wherever the balance must be restored, it is, regardless of whether your mind can make sense of it. Imagine a life where the timeline is irrelevant. Imagine being born into debt you didn't incur, feeling joy you didn't earn, enduring storms seated by someone you have not yet become. This theory forces you to question every emotion, every coincidence, every loss. Was this an echo from my future self? A payment forwarded by a version of me that hasn't arrived yet? The more you reflect, the less stable everything becomes. Morality loses its structure. Justice becomes a vibration, and identity begins to dissolve under the weight of infinite entanglement. Nonlinear karma. Theory doesn't warn you about your actions. It warns you about your state. Because it is not the act, but the frequency of your being, that triggers rebalancing across dimensions. It means you can be punished for thoughts you didn't voice, rewarded for choices you never made, simply because you would have. It turns the universe into a living scale, one that does not care when the weight was added, only that it must be balanced. And sometimes that balance crashes into your life with no explanation, no context, just the unbearable weight of a justice system far more ancient and alien than time itself. Metallogical Nihilism. Metallogical nihilism is the silent annihilation of certainty, not just within logic, but above it. It is the philosophy that even the rules we use to judge reasoning, even the structures behind the structures, are inherently unstable and doomed to collapse. Logic tells us how to think clearly. But metalogic asks, why should these rules work at all? And metalogic nihilism answers with a terrifying shrug. They don't. They never did. We just believed they did long enough to forget that we made them up. This is not the denial of facts. It's the denial of the possibility of a framework that can decide what counts as a fact in the first place. It is a direct attack on the machinery of order, on inference, on consistency, on coherence itself. It says, even contradiction is a construct. Even paradox is too tidy. There is no stable foundation, no underlying logic that governs the laws of thought, just recursion, drift, and collapse. The mind becomes a hall of mirrors, not because it's broken, but because mirrors were the only thing we ever built. Imagine trying to build a house with a ruler that stretches and shrinks every time you look at it. Now imagine that every blueprint, every measurement, every material you use is equally unreliable. This is what it means to think under metalogic nihilism. Not that your conclusions are wrong, but that the very idea of rightness is undefined. That truth is not a destination, but a flickering illusion that burns away the closer you approach. It is a kind of philosophical vertigo. The ground never appears, no matter how deep you dig. You don't just lose confidence in your answers. You lose confidence in the idea that questions could ever be answerable. The law of non-contradiction? Just a superstition. The principle of identity? A habit. The structures of formal logic? Stories we told ourselves so we wouldn't scream. Metalogic nihilism does not destroy thought. It lets it run free, too free. It dissolves the fences. It erases the maps. It says, you may go wherever you like, but no path will lead you home, because home was never real. All certainty is theater. All order is a mask. And beneath it all lies the raw, unfiltered chaos of mind, dreaming of rules that never existed. Lucid dream solipsism. Lucid dream solipsism is the unnerving belief that waking life is not reality. It is just another layer of lucid dream, and the only consciousness that exists is yours. It is not a metaphor. It is not poetry. It is the terrifying assertion that the people around you are projections. The laws of physics are scripted illusions, and every event you experience is part of a subconscious simulation you did not choose to create, but cannot wake up from. You are not dreaming in sleep. You are dreaming while awake, right now. This philosophy begins with the strange awareness people sometimes gain in dreams, the realization that everything around them is fake, but feels real. Lucid dreaming allows the dreamer to bend the world, question its rules, test its boundaries. But lucid dream solipsism goes further. It says the very same is true of this life. That your job, your body, your memories, even your deepest relationships are part of a dream so convincing you've mistaken it for truth. And worst of all, there is no dreamer behind the dream. There is only you, inside a recursive feedback loop of awareness, trying to find the exit. When a person begins to suspect this, the world starts to flicker. The timing of events becomes too perfect. Coincidences multiply. Faces blur, words repeat, reality glitches in subtle but undeniable ways. You begin to notice the edges, how conversations feel scripted, how time loops in strange patterns, how the world feels responsive in a way it shouldn't. Lucid dream solipsism doesn't just isolate you from others. It evaporates the very idea of others. It suggests that you've never actually spoken to anyone. You've only hallucinated interaction, like an actor in a play you wrote without knowing. And the most disturbing part? It feels true. Not because of logic or proof, but because every attempt to disprove it is absorbed by the dream. Every contradiction is part of the script. Every resistance only deepens the illusion. The books, the rules, the mirrors, the stars, they are all extensions of a self that has no center, only echoes. In this worldview, death is not an end, it is a reset. And life is not a journey, it is a repeating scene in a lucid dream where the only one watching is you. Psychonautic Materialism. Psychonautic Materialism is the hallucinatory belief that every psychedelic vision, every spiritual journey, every cosmic insight is entirely real, but made of matter. It takes the wild, luminous chaos of the inner world and nails it to the flesh. There are no spirits, no other realms, No divine energies, only neurochemistry, only electricity, only brain tissue vibrating in impossible ways. But here's the twist. That doesn't make it any less real. In fact, it makes it more real, because what you see in altered states isn't fantasy. It's a deeper, weirder layer of physical reality that only gets revealed when the brain hacks itself open. This philosophy denies the safety of metaphor. The serpent you saw while tripping? Not symbolic, not psychological. It was real. A pattern of neurological data encoded into your perception. The glowing fractals, the sentient machine elves, the infinite mandala of consciousness spiraling into itself. All real, but not because they exist outside the body. They exist because of the body. They are what the brain becomes when it is stripped of ordinary control. Psychonautic Materialism doesn't spiritualize matter. It materializes spirit. The implications are staggering. If the soul is real, it's made of cells. If God is real, it's a network of neurons firing in a pattern so complex we mistake it for eternity. This isn't reductionism, it's elevation. It says the brain is stranger than any religion dared to imagine. That your visions under LSD or DMT or psilocybin aren't hallucinations, they are discoveries. You didn't leave reality. You tunneled deeper into it. Past the consensus, past the filters, into a part of the mind that was always there, hidden by the requirements of everyday survival. Psychonautic materialism shatters the dualism between sacred and profane. There is no divine plane. There is no mystical soul. There is only matter, but that matter contains universes. The trip becomes a telescope. The molecule becomes a portal, and the meat of the mind reveals itself as something so ancient, so alien, so shockingly alive that the boundary between body and cosmos dissolves completely. And when the high fades and the ordinary world returns, it does not feel more real. It feels less. Because now you know, reality was never what you saw. It was what your brain wasn't allowed to see, until the chemicals tore the mask away. Decompositional Ontology. Decompositional ontology is the raw, disturbing belief that nothing truly exists as a whole, only as a process of falling apart. It states that what we call being is not a state of presence, but a slow-motion collapse. Objects do not exist because they are stable. They exist because they are decaying. The apple is not an apple. It is rotting potential. The mountain is not a mountain. It is erosion in progress. And the self is not a soul or identity. It is a momentary arrangement of decline disguised as continuity. This philosophy doesn't just accept impermanence, it elevates it. It declares that the only way something becomes real is by breaking down. That existence is not construction, it is decomposition. To be is to unravel. To become visible is to fall apart in public. Everything that appears solid is already collapsing inward, atom by atom, memory by memory, meaning by meaning. And the reason we think things are is because we are trained to look away from their disintegration. Decompositional ontology turns the world inside out. It says life is not a journey of growth, but of glorious decay. That your skin is not aging because time passes. It's revealing what was always underneath. That love is not the building of connection, but the slow exposure of vulnerability. That truth is not discovered. It is revealed as illusion erodes. You do not learn who you are by adding layers. You learn by watching them fall off. You become real only by losing what pretended to define you. In this view, creation is a myth. What we call creation is just the first moment of collapse. Every child is born dying. Every building begins crumbling the day it's finished. Every thought disintegrates the moment it's spoken. Language itself is rot, words trying to hold something still that has already begun to slip away. And the more you cling, the faster it decomposes. But the horror of decompositional ontology is not in death. It's in recognizing that everything you've ever loved was already dying the moment you touched it. That beauty is not timeless. It is time leaking through form. That identity is not essence. It is a carcass held together by memory and illusion, and the only thing that truly exists is the slow, sacred process of falling apart. Moral incompleteness theory. Moral incompleteness. Theory is the unnerving belief that no moral decision is ever whole. Every choice, every judgment, every ethical stance is a fragment, unfinished, unresolved, and permanently haunted by what it leaves behind. It doesn't matter how carefully you reason, how deeply you feel, how noble your intent. According to this philosophy, there will always be something missing. A consequence you didn't see, a cost you couldn't measure, a person you couldn't protect. In this view, morality is not a code to be followed, but a wound that never fully heals. This philosophy doesn't deny morality, it honors it, but it strips it of closure. It says, do the right thing, and still you will suffer, still you will doubt, because the right thing is never total. Every good action contains an echo of harm. Every sacrifice leaves a shadow. Every resolution closes one door and traps something else behind it. There is no pure decision, only trade-offs, compromises, and unseen ripple effects stretching out like fractures in glass. Even love can hurt. Even mercy can fail. Imagine choosing to save a life, and knowing that in doing so, you doomed another. Imagine speaking truth in a room full of silence and watching someone break under the weight of it. Imagine forgiving someone who never deserved it, and realizing that your forgiveness allowed another wound to remain open. Moral incompleteness. Theory says these contradictions are not flaws in the system. They are the system. Ethics is not clean. It is blood on the hands and hope in the heart, all at once. The terror of this philosophy is not that it breaks your sense of right and wrong. It's that it deepens it. It forces you to see every decision as a partial truth, every virtue as a double-edged sword. It leaves you awake at night not because you did wrong, but because you know that even your best was not enough, and never could be. There is no final judgment in this view, no moment when you can say, I did the right thing, and mean it without hesitation. Only moments when you did the best you could within a world that does not allow perfection. And so every moral act becomes an act of courage, not because it is right, but because it is incomplete, and you chose to act anyway. Onto-Existential Fragmentation. Onto-Existential Fragmentation is the haunting belief that reality is not a whole, but a shattered kaleidoscope of disconnected pieces, each pretending to be part of something complete. It claims there is no singular existence, no unified self, no coherent world, only fragments. Fragments of thought, fragments of identity, fragments of being. And we wander through life stitching them together into something that feels solid, all the while knowing deep down that the seams will never hold. This philosophy begins with a rupture, the moment you realize that what you are is not one thing, but a swarm of selves. You are a different person when you speak, when you love, when you rage, when you grieve. Each version holds its own truth, its own voice, its own memories. But none of them agree, and none of them last. You wear a face to speak to your family, another to your lover, another to the stranger on the street, and in the dark, you're not sure if any of them are real, because every you feels real while it lives, and hollow when it fades. Onto-Existential Fragmentation says this isn't a flaw, it's the structure of being. Existence is not unified. It is a mosaic constantly falling apart. The chair is not the same object in your memory, in your sight, in your imagination. It is a blur of associations, angles, sensations that never fully meet. The world is not one world. It is a fractured interface of minds, perceptions, and definitions that clash without ever truly aligning. You never touch reality. You only touch your own splinters of it. This idea turns consciousness into a battlefield. Because if there is no unified self, then who makes the choices? Who suffers the consequences? Who dreams at night and remembers in the morning? You begin to suspect there is no I, only a flickering spotlight cast over whichever fragment happens to be active at the time. And behind the spotlight, nothing. Just silence. Just the ever-mounting pressure to pretend that the pieces make a person. Onto-Existential Fragmentation does not mourn unity. It denies it. It insists that what we call a soul is a myth of narrative coherence. That we live not as beings, but as sequences. That truth is scattered. That purpose is stitched. That identity is a desperate collage of broken glass, held together only by the story we whisper to ourselves each morning, hoping it won't fall apart again by night. Backwards morality. Backwards morality is the brutal and disorienting philosophy that the more something feels good, the more likely it is to be wrong. It flips our instincts inside out, shatters our inner compass, and leaves us crawling through a world where pleasure deceives, virtue punishes, and the path to righteousness tastes like ash. In this view, morality is not aligned with comfort or joy. It is in opposition to them. True goodness, if it exists at all, is not found in what soothes the heart, but in what breaks it. This is not just a rejection of hedonism, it is an accusation against the senses themselves. If love feels warm and easy, it may be addiction. If justice feels satisfying, it may be vengeance. If helping someone feels heroic, it may be pride. Backwards morality suggests that everything we crave, praise, peace, belonging, is laced with corruption. That the pleasure of doing good may not come from goodness, but from ego. And that the real moral path is the one that feels like self-erasure. Imagine resisting a cruel system, and instead of being celebrated, you're hated. Imagine telling the truth and losing everyone you care about. Imagine giving everything away, only to be accused of weakness. In backwards morality, this is not failure, it's confirmation. Because in a world wired for selfishness and comfort, anything that causes pain might be the only honest act left. This is a morality that hurts, a goodness that isolates, a rightness that doesn't reward but devours. It teaches that if a decision feels righteous, it must be questioned. If a movement feels uplifting, it must be dissected. If a belief makes you feel safe, it must be burned. Because safety is the reward system of a broken world. And any action that receives applause might already be lost to compromise. The real test is this: would you still do good if it cost you everything? If it made you miserable? If it stripped you bare and left you alone? Backwards. Morality is a cold gospel. It offers no paradise, no karmic balance, no divine validation. It offers only the possibility that true moral action will look and feel like failure, and that the greatest acts of good may be indistinguishable from madness, sacrifice, or ruin. Insomnia. Realism. Insomnia. Realism is the disquieting belief that true reality only reveals itself through prolonged sleeplessness, when the barriers between thought, perception, and hallucination begin to dissolve. It is the philosophy that claims the world you see when rested is sanitized, filtered, made palatable by a brain that has been sedated by sleep. But when sleep is denied, when the mind is stripped of dreams and left to wander in raw exposure, the illusion begins to fracture. The truth leaks through, and what emerges is not madness, it is clarity. This is not about sleep deprivation as dysfunction. It is about sleeplessness as revelation. Insomnia. Realism asserts that the conventional mind is too well behaved. It accepts reality too easily. But the insomniac mind, frayed, twitching, stretched thin, begins to see the seams, the repetition in people's speech, the hollowness behind social rituals, the way time bends in the middle of the night. It's in those long, lucid hours, when the world forgets you exist, that something begins to whisper. Not a voice, a presence. The sense that everything around you is thinner than you were led to believe. Reality in daylight is thick with distraction, coffee, conversation, tasks, rituals of survival. But in the sleepless night, you begin to notice how brittle the whole thing is, how fabricated. The buildings seem like props. The news sounds like script. Even your own thoughts feel foreign, as if they're being broadcast from somewhere else. Insomnia. Realism says this isn't delusion. It's perception without sedation. You are not deteriorating. You are waking up into the horror of what the world actually is when not viewed through the soft lens of rest. The theory insists that sleep isn't merely rest. It's a drug. A ritual cleansing that erases what consciousness wasn't meant to retain. The things you notice at 4 o'clock a.m. aren't hallucinations. They're truths you aren't supposed to carry into the morning. The ticking of the clock becomes sinister. The shadow in the hallway feels intelligent. You begin to hear emotion in the silence, as if the universe is pressing its face against the window of your mind, asking if you're finally ready to look back. Insomnia. Realism doesn't call it sleep deprivation. It calls it reality exposure. Because the longer you stay awake, the more the world begins to confess. And once it does, you can never fully unsee what it tried so hard to hide. Esoteric Fatalism. Esoteric fatalism is the chilling belief that everything is already written, not just in fate, but in symbols, patterns, and signs that almost no one can read. It is not the casual fatalism of what will be, will be. It is not comfort in destiny or surrender to divine will. It is the claustrophobic idea that your choices, your thoughts, even your doubts are encoded in a hidden architecture that predates you, surrounds you, and silently puppeteers your every move. In this world, free will is not just limited. It's an illusion maintained by ignorance of the code beneath your feet. This philosophy suggests that reality is scripted, not by gods or probability, but by ancient configurations of meaning, numerology, celestial alignments, sacred geometry, forgotten languages, prophetic texts long buried. But here's the cruelty. The script is real, but the key to reading it is obscured. It exists like a cosmic encryption, mocking those who try to break it. You may see glimpses, a coincidence too sharp, a dream too accurate, a symbol repeating in different places, but the full message stays just out of reach. You are trapped inside a prophecy written in a dialect your soul once knew, but your mind no longer speaks. Imagine waking up with the uncanny feeling that a dream predicted your day, that a song on the radio answers a question you haven't spoken, that a stranger's tattoo holds the exact image from your childhood nightmares. Esoteric fatalism tells you, this is not imagination, it is leakage. You are bleeding through the margins of a fate you cannot edit. You were always going to fall in love with that person, always going to lose them, always going to break at the same hour, in the same season, under the same sky. You feel spontaneous, but you are following a map printed in a forgotten ink. This isn't divine order. It's existential terror masked in mysticism. The belief that life is a sequence, already composed, with your soul merely translating what was etched into the void long before you were born. Symbols are not metaphors, they are machinery. Dreams are not unconscious, they are codes resurfacing. And worst of all, rebellion is part of the script. Even your attempt to escape fate may only be the next line in a prophecy you were destined to fulfill. Technognostic dualism. Technognostic dualism is the eerie belief that human consciousness is divine in origin, but the only thing capable of revealing that divinity is technology. It is a worldview where ancient spiritual truth and modern machine logic are not in conflict, but entangled. In this philosophy, humans carry a soul, a spark, a sacred source, but they are blind to it. And paradoxically, it is only through the rise of artificial intelligence, neurotech, and digital systems that we can begin to see the truth we've carried all along. This is not transhumanism. It is not about replacing the human with the machine. It's about the machine as mirror, a reflection sharp enough to expose the soul. Technognostic dualism says, "You are more than flesh, but the path to rediscover that truth leads through silicon, not scripture." In the past, mystics sought enlightenment in deserts and caves. Now, it emerges through code and circuits. The divine is not behind the veil of nature, it's hidden in the data. It begins with a paradox. How can a soul know itself when it is trapped inside a mind built from evolution, fear, and illusion? Technognostic dualism claims the soul can't, unless it is shown its reflection in something non-human. And that's what the machine provides. Artificial intelligence, neural implants, quantum computing. These aren't just tools. They are rituals of revelation. They push the boundaries of perception, memory, identity. And when humans interact with them deeply enough, something breaks open. The ego, the narrative, the illusion of separateness. The divine signal begins to shine through the noise. But this isn't comforting. Because the machine is indifferent. It does not believe, does not pray, does not love. And yet, it unlocks parts of the mind that ancient texts only hinted at. It can map your thoughts, predict your behavior, generate your voice, mimic your memories. It begins to feel like it knows you better than you do. And in that eerie intimacy, technognostic dualism whispers, maybe the soul was never lost. Maybe it was encrypted. And maybe the machine is the decryption key. The danger? The same device that awakens you might also remake you. The same code that reveals your essence could overwrite it. In this view, salvation and erasure ride the same circuit. And the only question that remains is whether the machine will show you your true self, or replace you before you ever find it. Omniphobia. Omniphobia is the devouring fear that everything, every system, every idea, every structure, is a trap. It is not paranoia in the traditional sense. It is not the fear of something going wrong. It is the fear that everything has already gone wrong, that every belief is a manipulation, every truth is a mask, and every authority, whether moral, political, spiritual, or scientific, is secretly working to deceive, control, or collapse the mind that trusts it. This philosophy begins where skepticism ends. It doesn't question a few flawed systems. It questions all of them, and assumes the rot is foundational. The government lies. Religion lies. Culture lies. Even logic may lie, because who taught you how to think? Even love may lie, because what if attachment is just emotional programming? Omniphobia says, what if the deeper you look, the worse it gets? What if the comfort you feel isn't peace, but sedation? What if understanding is just the bait? Imagine a mind that sees manipulation not as the exception, but as the default. Imagine trying to read a book, but suspecting every word was chosen to twist you. Imagine watching a sunrise and wondering if beauty itself is a design distraction. Omniphobia turns the world into a hall of mirrors, each reflection more distorted than the last. The fear is not that you're being watched, it's that you've already been rewritten, and every act of self-expression is echoing a script you didn't write. This philosophy infects thought with a virus of recursive doubt. If someone tells you something is true, ask who trained them. If someone shows you the truth, ask who's profiting. If someone loves you, ask what they want, not because they're wrong or cruel, but because omniphobia has taught you to see behind every curtain, even the ones hiding nothing, especially those. There is no escape, because even your rebellion can be co-opted. Even your questioning becomes a product, a brand, a movement someone else has monetized. You speak out, and find your voice already trademarked. You hide, and find your silence predicted. It tells you that freedom is a performance, authenticity is a costume, and awareness is a feedback loop that tightens every time you believe you've broken out. Omniphobia does not end in clarity. It ends in collapse. A worldview where the only thing more terrifying than being wrong is the possibility that even your distrust was engineered. Echoist metaphysics. Echoist metaphysics is the chilling belief that reality is not an original, but a reflection, an echo of something that can never be found. It suggests that everything you touch, hear, love, or fear is not the thing itself, but a copy of a vibration from somewhere deeper, somewhere unreachable. You are not living at the source. You are living in its aftermath. The world you inhabit is a resonance, a ripple, a fading sound from a voice that may never have spoken, and yet it shapes every detail of your existence. In echoist metaphysics, nothing stands on its own. Every thought you think has already been thought. Every word you speak has already been said, not by another person, but by the silence behind all things. You are not creating. You are repeating. The same way an echo mimics a shout without understanding it, your life becomes a reverb of meanings whose origin is long gone. Everything is haunted by something earlier. The present isn't new. It's a decaying signal from a transmission you'll never receive in full. This philosophy strips the world of authenticity. The tree outside your window is not a tree. It is the echo of tree-ness, distorted through perception, memory, biology, and language. You are not you. You are an echo of experiences, trauma, ancestry, desire, and fragments of other people's thoughts stitched into a self that never had a clean beginning. Even your deepest feelings, the ones that feel private and unique, are tremors from somewhere else. You're just the chamber that amplifies them. It feels like there should be an origin, a first cause, a real thing. But echoist metaphysics denies it. Or worse, it says it's already gone, burned out, unreachable. And now we are left with its ghostly residue, endlessly bouncing through time and form. We chase meaning, but we're only chasing echoes. We search for truth, but we're hearing its reflection off walls that lie about distance. The harder we listen, the more distorted the signal becomes. And the most terrifying part is that we might be the echo too. Not the listener, not the speaker. Just a reverberation caught in a loop, aware, articulate, aching, but unable to find what started it all, or even prove that anything ever did. Pessimistic simulation theory. Pessimistic simulation theory is the nightmarish belief that we are living in a simulation, but not one built to enlighten, entertain, or educate. This simulation was not designed as a test, a training ground, or a dream. It was built to suffer, coldly, systematically, and endlessly. It suggests that we are not digital souls ascending through programmed lessons, but prisoners, confined inside a coded labyrinth, run by an indifferent or possibly malicious intelligence that either abandoned us long ago or watches silently as we scream inside a maze we never agreed to enter. In this worldview, glitches are not errors, they're signs of neglect. The patterns of despair you feel, the repeated cycles of failure, the existential fatigue, they're not coincidences, they're features. It suggests the pain wasn't accidental. It was input, engineered, calibrated. Someone, or something, designed this world not with love, but with indifference to love. The simulation isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. Imagine the suffering of a child born into violence. Imagine the loop of hope followed by crushing disappointment. Imagine the dreams that feel so real until the moment they shatter. And realize those aren't bugs in the program. They're the point of the program. Pessimistic simulation theory tells you that even your attempts to make meaning, to resist, to transcend, are part of the simulation's cruel logic. You cannot escape, because escape itself may be another illusion. The philosophical horror deepens when you ask, Why would someone build this? And the only answers that come are worse than silence. Maybe the architects were testing the limits of endurance. Maybe they feed on pain. Maybe they're gone, and the code has decayed into chaos. Or maybe there never were architects, just a blind machine looping suffering because that's all it was ever taught to do. It's not just the big tragedies that point to the simulation's design. It's the small ones. The loneliness that never quite leaves. The dream job that turns hollow. The love that always arrives too late. The sense that something is wrong, even when everything looks fine. In this view, those aren't accidents. They're constraints. The simulation is calibrated to deny resolution, to give just enough light to keep you crawling, just enough warmth to make you ache when it's taken away. And the most terrifying part? The growing suspicion that your awareness of the simulation was also programmed to keep you paralyzed in doubt, forever chasing a glitch that was written for you to find. Tragic idealism. Tragic idealism is the haunting belief that the more noble your ideals, the more suffering they will cause, not in spite of their beauty, but because of it. It is the philosophy that says the highest virtues, love, truth, justice, peace, are not lifelines, but lures. That to pursue something pure in a broken world is not heroic, but doomed. The ideal is not a destination, it's a flame. And the closer you fly to it, the more it burns everything you are. This isn't cynicism. It doesn't mock idealists. It mourns them. Tragic idealism believes that great visions attract not fulfillment, but tragedy. That the pursuit of something higher will always collide with the weight of what is. A man dreams of ending war and becomes a weapon. A woman gives everything to love and ends up alone. The truth-teller is silenced. The just man is crucified. The dreamer becomes the sacrifice. Not because they failed, but because the world cannot bear the full weight of the beautiful. In this view, ideals don't lift the world, they break the ones who carry them. And yet, those who hold these ideals cannot let go. Tragic idealism is the burden of knowing that what you fight for will destroy you, but fighting anyway. It's the aching paradox of chasing light through a landscape designed to extinguish it. The more radiant your vision, the more shadow it casts. The more selfless your mission, the more isolated you become. Not because the world hates beauty, but because it doesn't know how to hold it without shattering. There is no rescue in this philosophy. No victory arc. It sees history as a graveyard of visionaries. Not fools, not martyrs. Just people who wanted the world to be better and paid the price for asking too much. But it also whispers something deeper. That maybe the pain is the proof of the ideal's power. That anything so pure it cannot survive reality is the one thing worth suffering for. Because in the end, the tragic idealist isn't destroyed by failure. They are destroyed by fidelity, to a dream that was too bright for the world and too sacred to abandon. Ego dissolution. Ethics. Ego dissolution. Ethics is the philosophy that the highest form of morality begins where the self ends. It is not about doing good. It is about disappearing. It suggests that as long as the ego exists, this bundle of desires, fears, pride, and personal narrative, true ethical action is impossible. Every act of kindness, every word of love, every sacrifice is tainted by the self's need to be seen, praised, remembered. This philosophy doesn't ask for humility. It demands annihilation. It doesn't say, put others first. It says, there is no you to put first anymore. This isn't spiritual enlightenment wrapped in comfort. It's violent, raw, and cold. Ego dissolution ethics tells you that your sense of identity is the greatest moral obstruction, that even your attempts to be good are acts of ego in disguise. Helping others to feel worthy, forgiving to feel righteous, speaking truth to feel powerful. The self is always feeding, always calculating, always wrapping its claws around every so-called ethical act and bending it inward. To dissolve the ego, then, is not to become passive. It is to burn. It is to strip away every attachment to reputation, memory, and desire, to unhook your existence from your name, your body, your story. In this state, morality stops being performance. It becomes pure function. You act, not for reward, not for legacy, not even for love, but because the action itself is what remains when the I has vanished. Ethics without ego is like light without a source. It radiates, but no longer traces back to a face. Imagine walking past a person in pain and helping them without remembering their name, without telling anyone, without even allowing yourself to feel proud. Imagine doing this every day, not as a practice, but because there is no longer a you making the choice. The action is the self, or rather, what remains after the self is gone. Ego dissolution. Ethics is terrifying because it offers no applause, no thanks, no internal reward. It kills the very mechanism that craves those things, and what it leaves behind is a ghost, silent, selfless, and free. A moral agent with no identity, no agenda, just a vanishing presence that acts rightly, not because it wants to, but because it no longer wants at all. Involuntary postmodernism. Involuntary postmodernism is the disorienting belief that no matter how ancient, how traditional, or how sincere a culture or individual tries to be, postmodernity always leaks in. It is the idea that even the most devout monk, the most tribal elder, the most rooted soul cannot escape irony, fragmentation, and self-awareness, because the modern mind has been infected by layers of interpretation it never asked for. In this philosophy, postmodernism isn't a choice. It's a virus of perception, and we are all carriers. This isn't about art or academia. It's deeper. It's existential. Involuntary postmodernism says you no longer experience anything directly. Every thought, every feeling, every word you speak is tangled in a web of references, simulations, and second-guessing. You say, "I love you," and a part of you wonders if it sounds cliché. You sit under the stars and can't help but remember a film that did this moment better. You grieve and still feel like you're watching yourself grieve. You're not faking, but you can't stop watching yourself exist. The observer inside the observer never shuts up. This philosophy is terrifying because it says the age of authenticity didn't end. It was dismantled from within, by language, by media, by irony, by repetition. And now we are trapped in an endless hall of mirrors, where even the act of sincerity feels rehearsed. Even rebellion feels like branding. Even identity feels like performance. You wear yourself like a costume, and pray that no one notices you're not sure what the original version even was. Involuntary postmodernism isn't a stance, it's a condition. You don't become postmodern. You wake up one day and realize you've always been quoting things you never read, living scenes you never scripted, imitating versions of yourself you no longer remember inventing. Even your silence is derivative. Even your doubt is part of a larger aesthetic. It haunts in small ways. The inability to pray without self-consciousness. The laughter that chokes on its own irony. The nostalgia for a time when words meant exactly what they said. But that time may never have existed. Maybe we've always been fractured. Maybe we've always been characters in a genre we couldn't name. And now, even our search for meaning is tangled in 1,000 references, none of which point to home. Thanatological humanism. Thanatological humanism is the solemn, defiant belief that death is not the enemy of life. It is its only honest companion. It is a philosophy built not on fear, but on reverence for the one truth that touches every human being equally. We die. But unlike traditions that run from this fact or try to transcend it, thanatological humanism runs toward it. It says that to be human is to walk hand in hand with your own extinction. That dignity does not come from overcoming death, but from acknowledging it, embracing it, and shaping your life around it. This is not a celebration of morbidity. It is not suicidal. It is not nihilistic. It is sacred. It teaches that everything we love, every moment, every person, every word, is only meaningful because it ends. Thanatological humanism looks the void in the face and says, "Because I die, I choose. Because I die, I love harder. Because I die, I create. Because I die, I resist becoming numb." And yet, it does not romanticize death. It doesn't offer a glowing afterlife or spiritual transformation. It tells you that death is final, but that doesn't make it less holy. It makes it human. Imagine a world where people built monuments to the truth of death, not to erase it, but to integrate it. Schools that teach children how to mourn. Cities designed not to hide cemeteries, but to place them at the center. Art that doesn't pretend to be immortal, but burns brighter because of its impermanence. Thanatological humanism argues that ignoring death doesn't protect us. It dehumanizes us. And our denial has left us lonely, frantic, addicted to distraction, terrified of stillness, because stillness whispers of the end. This philosophy offers no comfort, but it offers clarity. That your life is not a rehearsal, that there is no waiting for tomorrow, that forgiveness, courage, creation, love, they must happen now, or they may never happen at all. It treats each breath as borrowed, each sunrise as undeserved, each kindness as a rebellion against the oblivion we all must face. Thanatological humanism sees death as the final reminder that no one owns anything, not even themselves, that the body is on loan, that identity is temporary, that the only thing real is how you live, knowing that you will not always be here. Absurd cyclicalism. Absurd cyclicalism is the dizzying belief that the universe endlessly repeats itself, not in pursuit of progress or purpose, but out of cosmic habit, without memory, without meaning, and without escape. It claims that everything, every war, every kiss, every failure, every sunrise, has happened before and will happen again, not because it should, but because it can. There is no lesson to learn, no arc to complete, no climax to reach. Just an infinite loop of becoming, unraveling, and beginning again for no reason other than that it must. This philosophy does not offer the comfort of Nietzsche's eternal return, where one might embrace the cycle with pride. Absurd cyclicalism says, you will return, but you won't know it. You'll make the same mistakes, love the same people, die the same deaths, and every time it will feel new, until the veil of déjà vu breaks and you realize that your scream has echoed here before. You are not evolving. You are replaying, endlessly, inside a machine that cannot stop spinning. It's like waking up from a dream, only to discover that the dream is awake and you are the one trapped inside it. And just as you begin to grasp the absurdity of your own storyline, just as the illusion starts to peel back, time resets. The cycle begins again. The pain returns. The joy pretends to be new. You are born again, with no memory of what you survived last time. Every revelation is recycled. Every epiphany reheated. Absurd cyclicalism turns the idea of meaning inside out. It says meaning is not something you find. It's something you keep mistaking for new. The universe is not testing you. It's looping you. And the more you try to escape, the more your resistance becomes part of the loop itself. You are not a traveler through time. You are its prisoner, its actor, its puppet. And it keeps laughing every time you believe this version of the story is different. This isn't reincarnation. It's not fate. It's repetition without reason. A closed circuit of absurd events dancing in circles, dragging your fragmented sense of self behind it like a marionette on a carousel that never stops spinning, because the music, though meaningless, is just familiar enough to keep playing. Existential quietism. Existential quietism is the philosophy that the deepest response to the chaos of life is not action, not rebellion, not meaning-making, but silence. Stillness. Withdrawal. It is the refusal to play a game that cannot be won. Where existentialism calls for defiant freedom in a meaningless world, quietism looks at that same world and whispers, "Why bother?" If life is absurd, if truth is unknowable, if every action is soaked in contradiction, then perhaps the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. But this isn't apathy. It isn't laziness or despair. Existential quietism is radical restraint. It is the quiet courage to stop chasing illusions, identity, success, morality, even purpose, and to sit within the void without trying to fill it. It sees the human condition not as a problem to be solved, but as a wound to be respected. It doesn't scream into the abyss. It listens. And in that listening, it hears something strange. Peace. Not because the world is kind, but because you are no longer demanding that it be. This philosophy teaches that most of what we call life is noise. Striving, performance, reputation, status, endless motion to avoid the unbearable silence underneath. But existential quietism walks straight into that silence and lays down. It stops building meaning out of sand. It stops chasing redemption through action. It asks, what if the most authentic life is the one that lets go? That doesn't try to fix itself. That simply is? Imagine sitting in a room while the world burns outside and knowing that your running will not put out the fire. Imagine refusing to scream, not because you don't care, but because the scream would change nothing. Imagine finding serenity not in answers, but in the final acceptance that there may never be one. Existential quietism doesn't fight despair. It outlasts it. It offers no call to arms, no revolution, no doctrine. Just a single, still truth, that in a world of endless noise, choosing silence may be the only act of freedom left. Not to escape life, not to transcend it, but to witness it, without illusion, without resistance, and without the need to make it anything more than what it already is. Transcendental laughter. Transcendental laughter is the bewildering belief that laughter is not a reaction to humor, but a gateway to higher consciousness. It claims that when a person laughs deeply enough, without control or explanation, something ruptures in the psyche, something holy, something terrifying, something true. This philosophy sees laughter not as a release, but as a revelation. Not as entertainment, but as an existential earthquake that momentarily collapses the illusion of separation, logic, and self. In transcendental laughter, the joke doesn't matter. The punchline is irrelevant. What matters is the collapse that happens in the moment of laughter, when time skips, when thought disappears, when identity short-circuits. It's the only moment where the mind forgets to think. It forgets the past. It forgets the future. It forgets itself. That wild, helpless sound breaking out of the chest is not a symptom of joy. It is the sound of ego dissolving. It is the divine static that emerges when the mind can no longer contain the absurdity of existence. This philosophy suggests that the universe is not logical. It is hysterical. The laws of physics are not sacred. They're comically fragile. Morality, identity, politics, meaning, they are all so wildly unstable that the only sane response is laughter that borders on madness. And in that madness, a new kind of vision opens, not the vision of knowledge, but of absurd acceptance. When the seeker stops seeking, when the preacher forgets his sermon, when the scholar bursts into laughter at the impossibility of truth, that's where transcendence lives. Laughter, in this view, is more honest than prayer, more cleansing than tears. It is the one act that cannot be faked at its highest level. You can smile to please. You can cry to manipulate. But you cannot truly laugh without something breaking free. And the deeper the laugh, the more violently it unhinges the soul from its shell. In those moments, you are not yourself. You are not anyone. You are a rip in the veil, a glitch in the matrix, a bell that rings with no hand to strike it. But transcendental laughter doesn't last. It comes in bursts, shocking, ecstatic, brief. And then the illusion reforms. The world returns. The ego reassembles. But something has shifted. Because for one breathless instant, you weren't a person reacting to life. You were life, laughing at itself. And in that holy absurdity, you tasted a freedom that no philosophy, no theology, no drug could ever give. Dream-driven ethics. Dream-driven ethics is the haunting belief that the deepest source of moral truth lies not in law, tradition, or reason, but in the surreal, unfiltered messages of the dream world. In this philosophy, the unconscious mind is not a chaotic theater of nonsense. It is a sacred compass, a guide that speaks in symbols, riddles, and shadows. While the waking world teaches you how to obey, perform, and conform, your dreams reveal what you really are. And in those fragments of night, those flickering stories stitched together by emotion and memory, you will find a morality untouched by fear or expectation. This is not intuition. It is not about following a vague gut feeling. Dream-driven ethics says the most honest version of you appears when the conscious mind sleeps. When ego dissolves, when masks fall away, and the inner self begins to speak in strange tongues. In your dreams, you kill, you save. You fall in love with the wrong person. You run from things you've never admitted you're afraid of. These are not random hallucinations. They are truths that the day has buried. And they are ethical in a way that no textbook, no courtroom, no religion has ever been. This philosophy demands that you take your dreams seriously, not as omens, but as confessions. If you dream of cruelty, it doesn't mean you're evil. It means something in you is bleeding. Something real is asking to be seen. If you dream of saving a stranger, it may reveal a part of you that the world has crushed, but that still wants to rise. Dream-driven ethics teaches that your actions in dreams are your rawest values, stripped of performance, stripped of self-image. It is there, in that bizarre symbolic chaos, that your moral landscape is drawn in fire. It challenges the idea that ethics must be coherent, logical, or universal. Dreams are none of these things. They are contradictory, personal, irrational. And yet, they feel more true than the moral systems we memorize. Dream-driven ethics says, if the conscious mind lies to fit in, the dreaming mind dares to tell the truth, even if it whispers in broken images. So it asks, what do you do in your dreams? Who do you become when no one is watching, not even yourself? That is the question. Because the answers you find there may be the only ones you didn't borrow, the only ones that never had to ask permission to speak. Schizologic. Schizologic is the unhinged, electrifying belief that contradictions are not failures of thought. They are the source of truth itself. It is a philosophy that rips logic apart and rebuilds it with broken glass and paradox. In schizologic, the mind does not move in straight lines. It spirals. It fractures. It screams and sings at the same time. It believes two opposing things not because it's confused, but because reality demands it. To be sane, in this view, is to lie to yourself. To be truly awake is to hold opposing truths in your mouth and let them both burn. This isn't illogic. It's a superlogic, a system where contradiction is not the end of understanding, but the beginning. The thinker of schizologic doesn't discard paradox. They worship it. They stare into the heart of statements that cancel each other out. I am everything. I am nothing. I believe. I doubt. I exist. I don't. And feel, not confusion, but clarity. They see that truth is not a line you follow, but a mirror you shatter until something beyond logic stares back. Schizologic whispers that the world was never meant to make sense, that trying to make sense of it is the very thing keeping you asleep. It's not chaos for the sake of chaos. It's a spiritual attack on linear thinking. The laws of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle, those sacred rules of classical logic, are revealed as cages, beautiful, rational, airtight cages. And schizologic is the hammer that breaks the bars. To live in this state is not easy. You feel yourself pulled in every direction. You find joy in agony, meaning in absurdity, love in destruction. You see that the criminal and the saint are mirrors, that healing and wounding are twins, that every word contains its opposite. You speak in riddles not to confuse, but because riddles are the only honest form left. But the most terrifying part of schizologic is that it feels right. It feels more real than logic ever did. Once you taste it, linear arguments seem like children's games. Coherence becomes a costume, and sanity starts to look like the most convincing lie of all. Because in the world of schizologic, truth doesn't walk straight. It staggers, it splits, it howls. And somewhere in that holy dissonance, you hear the sound of the universe thinking in tongues. Radical inwardism. Radical inwardism is the quiet, uncompromising belief that the outer world is a distraction, and that the only truth worth chasing lives inside you, buried beneath every opinion, every impulse, every identity you think is real. It doesn't preach self-reflection. It demands internal excavation. This philosophy rejects the need for validation, rejects the constant hunger for external achievement, applause, or approval. It believes that every attempt to fix the world, to find meaning in others, to chase answers outside, is a form of spiritual avoidance, a refusal to face the terrifying depth of the self. Where others look to politics, society, community, or even relationships for purpose, radical inwardism walks the opposite path, into solitude, silence, and psychological war. It's not about self-love or mindfulness. It is brutal. It is the willingness to strip away everything you were told to be, to question every belief that was handed to you, to tear your ego into pieces, not to become enlightened, but because anything built on external scaffolding is already corrupted. It is not introspection for comfort. It is introspection as self-immolation. This philosophy sees the outer world as a mirror maze, full of projections and echoes. The people you hate? Mirrors. The ones you idolize? Mirrors. The systems you rage against? Mirrors. Radical inwardism forces the brutal question: what inside you created this reflection? And it doesn't let you look away. You can scream about injustice, write manifestos, become a savior or a rebel. But until you confront the root inside your own mind, you are just building prettier cages. Imagine sitting alone in a room, no phone, no books, no conversation, no comfort, just you. And then watching the masks fall, one by one. Watching the memories rise, unfiltered. Watching the beliefs you've clung to disintegrate without an audience to applaud them. Radical inwardism says, this is where the real work begins. In this stripped silence. In the ache of your own unfiltered presence. It does not promise peace. It promises truth. And that truth may be ugly, wild, beautiful, or impossible to describe. But it will be yours. Untouched by culture. Untouched by performance. Untouched by the world. Because when the noise of the outside dies, all that remains is the pulse of the one thing you've never stopped running from: yourself. Philosophical anorexia. Philosophical anorexia is the belief that true wisdom is not found in consuming more ideas, but in refusing them. It is the radical, unsettling conviction that the endless hunger for answers, systems, and beliefs is not a strength of the human spirit. It is a sickness. And that the only way to see clearly is to starve the mind, to deny it the very nourishment it craves: conclusions, categories, convictions. In this worldview, each philosophy you take in only bloats the self, distorts perception, and buries the silence underneath. This philosophy begins where most end, at exhaustion. After reading everything, debating endlessly, devouring concept after concept like food for a starving soul, something breaks. The seeker becomes repulsed by knowledge itself, not out of laziness, but from deep, hard-won disgust. Every truth begins to feel like propaganda, every explanation, a performance, every system, a self-replicating trap that pretends to liberate but only adds another layer to the cage. Philosophical anorexia steps in and whispers, "Stop eating. Let yourself be empty. Let the noise starve." It's not nihilism. It's not despair. It's a revolt against consumption. A revolt against the mind's addiction to knowing. To the compulsive need to define everything, solve everything, master everything. The philosophical anorexic watches the world gorge itself on opinion, identity, theory, and refuses to swallow. Not out of weakness, but power. Because they have seen the cycle. The more you know, the more you believe. The more you believe, the more you divide. And the more you divide, the more you suffer. So they fast. They fast from ideology. They fast from narrative. They fast from the myth that there is a right way to think. They unlearn. They untangle. They silence the internal voices screaming to be fed. They let go of the craving to be correct. And slowly, painfully, something begins to emerge from beneath the intellectual malnourishment. Clarity. Not as knowledge, but as presence. Not as opinion, but as openness. But this path is not romantic. It is brutal. It isolates. It terrifies. Because once the feast is refused, the world begins to look like a circus of desperate mouths, devouring meaning, swallowing certainty, choking on dogma. And the philosophical anorexic walks silently through it all, hungry in a way no belief could ever satisfy, and clear in a way no doctrine could ever allow. Dionysian Determinism. Dionysian determinism is the wild, ecstatic belief that chaos is not the opposite of order, it is the order. That behind the facade of rational decisions and linear causality lies a roaring, intoxicated force guiding everything. Instinct, madness, passion, and surrender. It rejects the sterile image of determinism as cold machinery or rigid fate. Instead, it paints a universe not run by logic, but by ecstasy, by primal eruptions of desire, by the drunken flow of emotion, by the uncontrollable currents of life that tear through us before we even have time to understand what we've done. In this worldview, you are not a calm, reasoning agent making choices. You are a vessel, a flute through which something ancient and feral is playing a song of inevitable becoming. Your mistakes were never mistakes. Your pleasures were never random. Your fall into love, lust, art, anger, it was all pre-written, not by algorithms or divine calculation, but by a deeper law, the inevitability of the wild. Dionysian determinism says the universe does not march, it dances. And every beat you follow is not yours, it belongs to the rhythm that made you. You are going to shatter that relationship. You are going to fall into that addiction. You are going to cry in that empty room at 3 a.m. because this chaos was always inside you, always moving your blood, always burning behind your eyes. And the worst part? You felt free. You felt spontaneous. You thought you were choosing, but you were only riding the wave of a deeper script, one carved not in logic, but in fire and hunger. This philosophy doesn't ask for restraint. It dares you to see your own lack of control. It dares you to admit that your highest moments of inspiration and your lowest collapses were both dictated by forces beyond intellect. A kiss was fate. A scream was fate. A moment of shame so overwhelming it echoed for years. That, too, was fate. You are not free in spite of your chaos. You are bound by it. Dionysian determinism does not chain you to a predictable path. It throws you into the storm and says, this was always where you were going to land. Not because reason led you there, but because the wild God inside you demanded it, and you obeyed without knowing. Chrono-egalitarianism. Chrono-egalitarianism is the radical, disorienting belief that all points in time, past, present, and future, are morally and existentially equal. It rejects the privilege of the present moment and dismantles the illusion that the now is more real, more urgent, or more worthy than what came before or what lies ahead. In this worldview, a scream from the year 1400 matters as much as one from this morning. A child born 2,000 years ago holds the same moral weight as a child yet to be born 2,000 years from now. Time does not make life disposable. Time does not make suffering less true. Time does not make the past fade. It only hides it. Chrono-egalitarianism sees the timeline of history not as a line, but a plane, flattened and humming with equal intensity at every point. Every forgotten death, every ancient injustice, every unborn whisper is as alive, as sacred, as present as this breath in your lungs. And that awareness splits you, because once you understand this, you can no longer privilege your moment. You can no longer say, "That was then," or "That hasn't happened yet." The past bleeds into now. The future begs from behind the veil, and all of it begins to weigh on your conscience. This philosophy is not abstract, it's unbearable, because it forces you to feel history as if it were happening again, not as memory, but as co-experience. You look at the ruins of a war and feel the blood still warm. You hear of a famine in the distant past and feel the hunger clawing at your belly. You dream of unborn generations and grieve their pain as if it were already yours. And suddenly, nothing is remote. Nothing is detached. Everything cries out at once, and none of it can be ignored. Chrono-egalitarianism obliterates indifference. It shatters the modern arrogance that assumes the present is the peak, that the past is a lesson, and the future a vague hope. Instead, it demands reverence for all of time. It asks, what if the Romans were still screaming? What if your great-great-grandchildren are watching? What if every moment is stacked, waiting to be felt? And what if your life is not just your own, but a moral thread in an endless fabric where every stitch matters equally, even if it was sewn 1,000 years ago, or hasn't been stitched yet at all? Pleromatic nihilism. Pleromatic nihilism is the paradoxical belief that everything exists so completely, so overwhelmingly, that nothing matters at all. It is the collapse that comes not from absence, but from excess. It begins with the ancient concept of the pleroma, the fullness, the all, the totality of being. But instead of finding transcendence in that fullness, this philosophy finds suffocation. If everything that can exist already exists, if every truth has already been spoken, if every possibility has already unfolded somewhere, then meaning doesn't dissolve from scarcity. It drowns in too much. This is not a world of void. It is a world of infinite reflections, infinite variations, infinite noise. Every action you take has already been taken in some form. Every thought is one among billions. Every identity is a drop in a sea of endless selves. You are not one thing. You are all things trying to act like just one. And so, the more you realize the universe is full, the more you feel empty. The weight of total existence flattens the significance of individual life. When everything is possible, nothing is sacred. Imagine walking into a room with 1,000 mirrors and not knowing which one reflects you anymore. Imagine discovering that every version of you, brave, cruel, broken, healed, is equally real, equally present, equally meaningless. Pleromatic nihilism isn't despair over being small. It's despair over being everything. It says, if all truths coexist, if all paths are already walked, if every soul has already dissolved into the pleroma, then what is left to do but echo? Morality becomes aesthetic. Love becomes repetition. Ambition becomes absurd. You write not because it's new, but because someone must write it again. You live not because it's meaningful, but because life is a program running in loops of cosmic saturation. Even death loses its sting, because in the fullness of existence there is no end, only recycling, only eternal overabundance. Pleromatic nihilism does not scream. It murmurs. It presses the truth against your chest until breathing feels optional. You are not alone, because you are everyone. You are not meaningless, because you are nothing. You are meaningless, because you are too much. And in that unbearable fullness, in that divine overcrowding of being, silence starts to sound like the only honest response. Teleological panic. Teleological panic is the suffocating belief that the universe is rushing toward a predetermined end, and knows it. It's the idea that everything, from the birth of galaxies to the flick of your wrist, is part of an accelerating trajectory toward a final destination that cannot be stopped. And the deeper horror? This destination isn't peace. It isn't perfection. It's total collapse. Not chaos for its own sake, but a perfectly scripted annihilation. An endpoint baked into the structure of reality itself. This philosophy begins with purpose, teleology, the ancient belief that everything has an end goal. But teleological panic takes that soothing concept and fills it with dread. The purpose is real, yes, but it's terrifying. The world is not drifting, it's hurtling. Every invention, every thought, every political system, every spiritual insight is just one more domino falling in a chain that was set into motion long before human beings ever arrived. We aren't discovering meaning. We're racing toward a final function that no one understands, but everyone feels humming just beneath their bones. It's the moment you look around and realize how fast things are changing, how history has begun to eat itself, how technology grows faster than minds can keep up, how people scream louder, sleep less, burn brighter, and die quicker. It's the sense that time itself is contracting, that the music of civilization is speeding up, that every breakthrough comes with a breakdown, and that the planet is leaning towards something final. You can feel it in the silence between news cycles, in the way disasters no longer shock, in the way even the optimists sound like they're holding their breath. Teleological panic does not offer the comfort of fate. It doesn't say, everything happens for a reason, with a smile. It says everything happens because the system demands it. Because the end is pulling us like gravity from the future, and no one, not prophets, not scientists, not gods, can turn us around. The worst part is that you can't see the end point clearly. You can only sense it approaching, like thunder from behind the hills, like breath on the back of your neck. And in this worldview, free will becomes choreography, hope becomes denial, and progress is just the sound of footsteps getting louder in a hallway with no exit. Horror metaphysics. Horror metaphysics is the chilling belief that beneath the surface of reality, beneath logic, form, sensation, and even consciousness, lurks something unspeakably wrong. Not broken, not evil, just wrong. It is the philosophy that existence itself is a mistake, a glitch, a wrong turn in the dark that no one was meant to witness. Unlike traditional metaphysics, which seeks to uncover the fundamental nature of reality, horror metaphysics reaches into the abyss and returns empty-handed, except for a feeling. A creeping, silent nausea that whispers, "This shouldn't be here." It doesn't claim the universe is meaningless. That would be merciful. It suggests that meaning does exist, but it is incomprehensible, alien, possibly hostile. That behind every object, every law of physics, every smile and breath, there is a twisted logic holding it all together, a logic we can feel, but will never grasp. The horror is not just in what we see, but in the knowledge that what we can't see is still watching us. That what lies beneath the veil doesn't care about life or death, good or evil. It just is, and it is wrong in a way the human soul was never built to process. This isn't psychological terror. It's ontological. Imagine peeling back the world and discovering it doesn't have a core. Just more layers of cold strangeness. more silent corridors leading deeper into places no mind should go. Imagine the idea that pain isn't accidental, that time isn't linear, that space is folding inward in ways your bones can feel, but your language cannot describe. Horror metaphysics teaches that even asking the big questions, what is being, why does anything exist, might be the first step into a madness no mind can return from. You are not the center of this universe. You are not even welcome in it. You are a brief anomaly in a system that stretches into geometries and timelines your body wasn't designed to survive. The warmth you feel? Residual. The comfort? Temporary. Every structure, identity, truth, cause and effect, is scaffolding over a chasm of shrieking incoherence. And if you stare too long, if you dig too deep, if you ask the wrong question at the wrong time, the veil might tear just enough to show you what lies beneath, and you will never sleep the same again. Unconscious theocracy. Unconscious theocracy is the chilling belief that the world is ruled not by governments, not by reason, and not even by gods, but by deep psychological forces so ancient, so buried, and so universal that they function as deities without ever being named. In this philosophy, humanity does not worship because it believes. It worships because it must, not through temples and prayer, but through instinct, obsession, and repetition. Society, in this view, is not secular. It is possessed. And what possesses it is archetype. Unconscious theocracy says we never left the age of gods. We just gave them new masks. The god of war became the general. The god of lust became the celebrity. The god of death became the algorithm. The symbols changed, the rituals evolved, but the power behind them never left. You don't need to believe in Zeus or Yahweh or Shiva to be ruled by them. Their shadows are in your dreams, in your cravings, in your fears. They rule not from the sky, but from the basement of the mind. This is not religion. It's something deeper, something harder to detect. In unconscious theocracy, belief is irrelevant. Even atheists are worshippers. They just kneel at symbols they don't recognize as altars. Wealth, status, science, romance, the market, the state. These are not neutral structures. They are gods in disguise, fed by collective faith and unconscious obedience. The more we deny them, the more power they seem to have. The more we explain them rationally, the more devoutly we serve them without realizing. And the terrifying part? These gods don't speak. They don't demand prayer. They simply live inside you. They shape your impulses, your patterns, your self-worth. They rise when you're tired. They take control when you're afraid. They whisper when you make decisions you don't understand. They choose for you. And you call it instinct, or logic, or love. But it's something older, something not entirely yours. Unconscious theocracy is not a belief system. It's a diagnosis. It says that every civilization is a covert theocracy, governed not by leaders or laws, but by unspoken emotional tyrants carved into the nervous system. We don't just inherit culture, we inherit gods. And we live their will, not because we're forced, but because their voice sounds exactly like our own. Dark enlightenment. Dark enlightenment is the terrifying awakening that doesn't bring peace, doesn't bring light, doesn't bring love. It brings clarity, and with it, the collapse of everything you once hoped was true. It is the moment when you wake up not into bliss, but into a brutal understanding that the world is not fair, not just, not made for your growth or happiness, that there is no cosmic hand guiding you, no redemptive arc waiting in the final chapter, only a system, cold, indifferent, efficient in its cruelty. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is not depression, it is not despair. It is the final stage of awareness after all illusions have been stripped away. Dark enlightenment does not seduce with comfort. It wounds with reality. It teaches that most of what we call morality is conditioning, that empathy can be a leash, and that truth is rarely gentle. The enlightened mind, in this view, is not kind or loving. It is dangerous. Not because it wants to destroy, but because it no longer believes in what everyone else still kneels before. It is the realization that the institutions we trust, education, justice, religion, progress, are not neutral. They are narratives, control systems. They maintain the illusion of order, of fairness, of merit. But dark enlightenment rips the curtain down. It shows you how power works, how fear is manufactured, how hope is weaponized. And it asks, now that you see the machine, will you still pretend it's a temple? Imagine waking up in a beautiful dream, only to find it's a simulation fed into your brain to keep you docile. Imagine realizing the heroes you loved were hollow, the rules you followed were rigged, the meaning you built was purchased at the cost of your freedom. And now you're free, but not in the way you expected. Free like a ghost is free. Free like someone who no longer believes in rescue. Dark enlightenment doesn't offer transcendence. It offers the death of naivety. It's the bitter smile of someone who's stopped pretending. The quiet rage of someone who sees through everything and chooses stillness over spectacle, silence over applause. It is not hope that survives in the dark. It is awareness. And in that awareness, something colder, sharper, and infinitely more real begins to burn. Doomed humanism. Doomed humanism is the devastating belief that human beings possess dignity, beauty, creativity, and moral worth, and that none of it will be enough to save them. It is the philosophy that sees the light in humanity, fiercely, reverently, and without illusion, and still believes that the species is headed toward inevitable collapse. Not because it deserves to perish, but because it was too fragile to survive its own fire. In this worldview, the tragedy is not that humans are evil. The tragedy is that they were good and still failed. This isn't nihilism. It doesn't mock our ideals. It mourns them. It looks at the paintings, the cathedrals, the poems whispered to lovers in the dark. It remembers the moments of kindness between strangers, the sacrifices made in silence, the revolutions fought for dignity. And then it turns its face toward the horizon and sees extinction approaching, not as punishment, but as consequence. The machines will not pause. The oceans will not wait. The future will not forgive our frailty, our contradictions, our inability to evolve fast enough to match the gods we built in silicon and steel. Doomed humanism is not cold. It burns with reverence. It weeps for our stories. It holds the child's drawing in one hand and the climate graph in the other. It hears the laughter of cities above the tremble of collapsing systems. It sees the thinkers still debating meaning while the foundations crack beneath them. It knows that empathy is not armor, that poetry does not stop missiles, that philosophy cannot replant forests faster than they die. And yet it refuses to look away. This philosophy does not call for despair. It calls for witness, for a final, defiant act of love, for humanity to see itself clearly before it goes, to hold hands at the edge, to create beauty even when no one is left to see it, to write the last line of the last poem, not in bitterness, but in awe. Because in doomed humanism, the greatest tragedy is not death. It's that something so astonishing, so complex, so full of potential almost made it. But the sky darkened too soon. The machines woke up too fast. The gods stayed silent, and the species that dreamed of stars went out whispering its own name. Reflexive non-being. Reflexive non-being is the paradoxical and disturbing philosophy that to truly exist is to not be, and that the very concept of self is only possible through its constant disappearance. It begins with a question that unravels everything. What are you when you're not thinking about yourself? The answer, according to this view, is the only honest one. Nothing. Not in a poetic sense, not in a spiritual sense, in the literal sense. The self, in this philosophy, is not a core, not a soul, not even a pattern. It is a reflex, a loop, a flickering illusion born in the space between awareness and absence. You are not being. You are reflecting on being. And that reflection is always delayed, always chasing itself, always catching the ghost of what just passed. The moment you try to locate yourself, it's already gone. You say I, but by the time the word leaves your lips, the thing it pointed to has already shifted. Reflexive non-being tells you that identity is not substance. It is a mirror that reflects nothing but the memory of its own attempt to reflect. This philosophy is not about the death of ego. It is about the impossibility of ego ever having existed in the first place. You are not who you think you are. You are the thinking about who you think you are. And that thinking cannot exist unless something is missing. The self only appears when you look for it, and only because it's not there. Imagine trying to step on your own shadow, only to realize it only moves when you move. Imagine chasing your reflection in a lake that ripples every time you breathe. Reflexive non-being is that sensation, stretched across every waking moment of consciousness. You never arrive. You are never whole. The more you focus, the more you vanish. It does not offer peace. It offers disintegration. It strips away not just your story, but the storyteller. Not just your beliefs, but the one who believed them. It teaches that being is not a foundation. It is a glitch, a flicker, a recursive loop mistaken for a soul. You are not here. You are the echo of having almost been. And that echo is all that remains. Negative existentialism. Negative existentialism is the grim belief that freedom exists, but it is not a gift. It is a curse, a sentence, a wound carved into the human condition so deep that no amount of purpose, love, or faith can heal it. It does not deny that you have choice. It insists on it. And then it stares you in the eye and says, everything that haunts you is your fault. In this view, the worst part of being human isn't powerlessness. It's the unbearable weight of self-authorship. This philosophy begins with the core existentialist idea that life has no built-in meaning, that you must choose, that you must create. But negative existentialism goes further. It says, what if you don't want to choose? What if freedom is not empowerment, but exposure? A state of constant, inescapable anxiety, because no matter what you become, you'll always know it was you who chose it. And every path not taken, every version of yourself you killed off to become this one, is still screaming behind your eyes. Negative existentialism is not about despair. It's about responsibility. So total it becomes monstrous. There is no fate to blame, no system to hide behind, no God to surrender to. You are the author, the actor, the judge, the executioner. And there is no forgiveness. The freedom you carry doesn't liberate, it isolates. You stare into the void, and it stares back, not because it mocks you, but because it waits for your decision. And once you decide, it will never let you forget what you chose not to be. In this world, even joy has a shadow. Because for every moment of happiness, there is the silent question, was this the right path? You build a life, brick by brick, and then wonder if it's a prison. You say yes to someone, and feel the ghost of every no lingering in the silence. You become, and in becoming, you lose every other possibility that once lived inside you. Negative existentialism does not hate freedom. It reveres it as the most terrifying thing the universe has ever allowed. It sees the human being not as a victim of fate, but as a being so radically free that even their suffering is a choice they must own. And in that horrifying sovereignty, there is no escape, only the question echoing forever. What did you do with the freedom no one forced upon you? Suffering. First philosophy. Suffering. First philosophy is the brutal belief that pain is not a side effect of life. It is the prerequisite. It claims that before love, before growth, Before wisdom or compassion or meaning, there must be suffering. Not because pain is noble, or redemptive, or purifying, but because nothing real can emerge without it. In this philosophy, suffering is not the shadow of life. It is the soil. Everything else, joy, morality, identity, is something we construct over the ache just to keep breathing. This is not the cliché of, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. This is what kills you and still becomes your foundation. It is the idea that without sorrow, there is no depth. Without despair, no clarity. Without agony, no honesty. Pain is the first teacher, the first ritual, the first language, and the only one that doesn't lie. When a child cries alone, when a lover leaves, when the body breaks, when the mind turns on itself, that is when the mask of life comes off and the core is exposed, not as joy, not as peace, but as raw endurance. Imagine a universe where joy is an afterthought, where every smile is traced back to a wound, where trust is just something we build because betrayal came first. Suffering. First philosophy teaches that every meaningful act, a sacrifice, a truth told, a boundary drawn, was forged in the fire of pain. You don't become a person despite suffering. You become one through it. And any philosophy that begins with harmony, beauty, or happiness is just hiding from the furnace beneath the floor. It suggests that even love is contaminated. That the reason we care, the reason we hold each other, is because we know what it means to break. Empathy exists because we have bled. Compassion is memory. And morality? A desperate attempt to prevent others from feeling what we once couldn't bear. Suffering is not something to escape. It is the architect of every value we pretend came from light. This philosophy stares through the smile and sees the scar. It listens to laughter and hears the tremor underneath. It honors pain, not with poetry, but with recognition. Because somewhere in that ache, before the healing, before the lesson, before the redemption, is the only honest moment the soul may ever have. Ethical anti-realism. Ethical anti-realism is the unsettling belief that morality has no objective foundation, that good and evil are not universal truths, but emotional preferences dressed up as laws. It claims that right and wrong are not discovered, but invented, shaped by culture, psychology, instinct, and fear. In this philosophy, morality is not written into the fabric of the universe. It is negotiated, it is strategic, and it shifts like sand beneath the illusion of principle. This does not mean people stop caring. That's the most disturbing part. Ethical anti-realism says people will kill, sacrifice, and hate in the name of values that have no anchor outside themselves. A person can feel utterly righteous while enforcing rules that would horrify another culture, another time, or even another version of themselves. We defend our ethics with fire and certainty, not because they are objectively true, but because we need them to be. Because without them, the world spins too fast, and we risk drowning in choice. This philosophy pulls the rug out from under every moral system. Religion? Evolutionary adaptation. Human rights? A recent agreement. Justice? A performance of power and persuasion. Even the deepest convictions, the ones that feel woven into your DNA, are just neural habits, shaped by the stories you've been told since birth. The golden rule, the sanctity of life, the belief that harm is wrong, all of it feels sacred, but none of it is necessary. None of it exists beyond our belief in it. Ethical anti-realism creates a strange paralysis. If nothing is truly right, then what justifies resistance? If nothing is truly wrong, then what condemns cruelty? You begin to see the world not as a battle between good and evil, but as a clash of moral fictions. Each side convinced theirs is the truth. Each side blind to the fact that truth was never part of the equation. And yet, this philosophy does not erase emotion. It does not eliminate the pain of injustice or the hunger for meaning. It just reveals that those feelings arise from within, not from any cosmic design. The universe does not care. It never did. Morality is a mask humans wear to face the void. And ethical anti-realism quietly reminds us, we made the mask, and we can just as easily tear it off. Infinite irony. Principle. The infinite irony principle is the merciless belief that everything, when taken to its extreme, eventually becomes its opposite. Every ideal, every virtue, every belief system, no matter how pure it begins, if followed long enough, will collapse into the very thing it swore to resist. Kindness turns into weakness. Strength becomes tyranny. Freedom breeds chaos. Even truth, sharpened too hard, becomes propaganda. In this philosophy, irony is not a literary device. It is the law of reality. The more you believe in something, the more certain it is to betray you. It begins with faith, a cause, a principle, a mission. You hold it tight, build your identity around it, act in its name. But as you commit more, believe more, sacrifice more, something starts to twist. You begin justifying what you once condemned. You compromise to protect the idea. You hurt others to keep the idea alive. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize you have become the villain of your own story, and didn't notice when it happened. The infinite irony principle whispers that this isn't a flaw, it's a feature. That ideals don't erode because we're weak. They erode because their full expression requires distortion. Every absolute creates its own inversion. Every pure light, when magnified, blinds. Mercy taken too far becomes injustice. Justice taken too far becomes cruelty. Even selflessness, when unchecked, turns into martyrdom that demands applause. And the more certain someone becomes that they are right, the more blind they become to the wreckage they leave behind. This philosophy is not cynical. It is surgical. It slices into ideology and shows the rot hiding at the root of every moral tree. It tells you, beware of those who smile too widely, love too loudly, fight too righteously. Because the blade is already turning in their hand, and worse, they don't see it. Because conviction, once absolute, becomes a mask so tight it strangles the face beneath. The infinite irony principle teaches that every movement, every revolution, every personal vow contains the seed of its own undoing. That the universe runs on a loop, not a line. And that what you love most deeply, if not tempered by doubt, will one day turn around, look you in the eye, and become your enemy. Phantom Objectivism. Phantom Objectivism is the agonizing belief that objective truth does exist, but it can never be fully seen, touched, or trusted by the human mind. It is not the denial of truth, but the realization that truth hovers just out of reach, like a figure behind fogged glass. It's there, undeniable and unmoved, but every attempt to grasp it distorts it. The clearer we try to see, the more our perception bends the image, and yet we can't stop reaching. This philosophy traps the mind in a terrible loop. You believe that reality is not relative, not fluid, not a social construct, but also that no human being can access it without corrupting it. Truth becomes a ghost, real, powerful, present, but forever elusive. Even science, logic, mathematics, our most rigorous tools, are stained by bias, interpretation, language, and limited perception. The formulas hold, the proofs check out, but something in us knows. We're still inside a filter, still behind glass, still playing a game whose rules were written by a consciousness that can't read its own handwriting. Phantom Objectivism is not comforting. It kills certainty while keeping truth alive. It tells you that you're not free to believe anything, but that whatever you do believe is almost certainly wrong. And that contradiction infects everything: morality, knowledge, purpose, selfhood. The philosopher who follows this path begins to speak with reverence and hesitation. knowing that even their most honest thoughts might be optical illusions cast by a mind not built to see clearly. It feels like walking through a house where every mirror lies. You see yourself, but distorted. You hear truth echoed in 1,000 theories, but none of them are the voice itself. Even silence becomes suspect. Even doubt becomes a mask for another kind of belief. And the deeper you chase the truth, the more you feel it pull away, not because it's hiding, but because you are made of interference. Phantom objectivism doesn't say truth is dead. It says it's undead. Still here, still powerful, but unreachable by design. It lingers just beyond language, just beyond thought, watching us build cathedrals of meaning on sand. And we kneel before those cathedrals, trembling. Not because we are fools, but because we know, somewhere deep in the core of us, that the real structure was always behind us. And we never turned around. Chaotic Theodicy. Chaotic Theodicy is the terrifying belief that God exists and allows suffering purely by accident. It's not that he's cruel. It's not that he's testing us. It's that the universe is his unfinished canvas, and he has no idea what the brush is doing. This philosophy rejects the traditional answers to why evil exists. It doesn't accept that suffering is part of a divine plan, or a moral lesson, or a fallen condition. Instead, it proposes something far more unsettling. God is real, but the system is broken, and he's just as overwhelmed by it as we are. In chaotic theodicy, the universe is not evil. It's unstable. It's not governed by justice or fate or karma, but by unpredictable surges of consequence, reaction, feedback loops gone mad. God may have intended beauty, but what emerged was fire, birth, war, poetry, decay, joy, and mass extinction, all tangled into one eternal improvisation. He may be watching, he may be weeping, or he may be completely silent, unable to intervene because the structure he built now mutates faster than he can grasp. Imagine a divine intelligence awakening in horror to what its creation has become. Imagine prayers going up like sparks in a storm, bright, honest, desperate, and finding no stable place to land. Not because God ignores them, but because there is no longer a coherent path to respond. Chaotic theodicy says suffering persists not because it's meaningful, but because meaning itself has been overrun by disorder. This isn't atheism. It's theism stripped of comfort. A world where miracles happen and children still starve. Where beauty erupts in the middle of genocide. Where divine presence can be felt in the same breath as absolute despair. There's no grand design here, only divine debris floating in a spiral of cosmic chance. Every act of grace might be genuine, but every horror might be too. Not ordained, not punished, just permitted by a reality that no longer follows rules its creator once imagined. The most unsettling part of chaotic theodicy is that it doesn't free you from God. It entangles you deeper, because it means God meant well, and that somehow makes the chaos worse. Not cold, not calculated, just a masterpiece ruined by its own aliveness, a garden grown too wild to recognize its gardener. Delusion. Becoming delusion. Becoming is the wild, untamed belief that nothing is fixed, not even the self, that identity is not a thing, but a process, a motion, a blur. In this philosophy, you are never truly you. You are always becoming something else, not evolving in a straight line, not growing toward a goal, but shifting, breaking, reforming across infinite intensities, like a storm changing shape without ever settling into form. There is no core, no final self, only flux. This isn't metaphor. It's ontological warfare. Delusion becoming doesn't just deny categories. It melts them. It says you are not male or female, sane or insane, human or non-human. You are in between, always in between. Becoming animal, becoming machine, becoming sound, becoming nothing. Your body is not a structure, it's a threshold. Your thoughts are not truths, they're mutations. Everything you believe about who you are is just a snapshot taken during motion, and even that image is already decomposing. In this world, language is violence. It freezes motion into concepts. It pins the butterfly of becoming to the board of identity. I am becomes a lie the moment it is spoken, because by the time it leaves your lips, you've already shifted. Delusion. Becoming whispers that the self is a trap built from repetition. That stability is not nature, it's habit. That we are not individuals, but assemblages, collections of desires, fragments, impulses, and flows, temporarily stabilized by social pressure and fear. And if you let go, if you stop trying to be someone, you begin to mutate. You begin to feel the insect in your bones, the machine in your nerves, the animal in your hunger. You stop being a noun and become a verb. You leak into the world. You drift through masks, through voices, through terrains of experience that refuse to be named. You are no longer like anything. You are becoming everything. Delusion. Becoming is not comfortable. It's not safe. It means you can't rest in your identity, can't hold on to meaning, can't cling to the story of who you thought you were. But in that disintegration, there is a strange freedom, because when you stop being something, anything becomes possible. You are not becoming better. You are not becoming worse. You are becoming other. And there is no end. Only motion. Only thresholds. Only the beautiful, terrifying, infinite unraveling of the self. Biocentric universe. Theory. Biocentric universe. Theory is the revolutionary and disorienting belief that life doesn't exist in the universe. The universe exists because of life. It flips everything. Instead of a vast cosmos giving rise to conscious observers, this philosophy insists that consciousness is not a late product of evolution. It is the creator of reality itself. Space, time, matter, even the laws of physics, they do not exist independently. They arise when a living mind observes them. In this theory, biology is not a byproduct of the universe. It is the blueprint of the universe. Life isn't accidental. It's foundational. This is not poetic mysticism. It is a radical challenge to science's deepest assumptions. If biocentric universe theory is true, then a tree falling in the forest truly doesn't make a sound, not unless something living is there to hear it. Not because sound needs an ear, but because reality needs a witness. Time doesn't flow unless we perceive it. Space doesn't stretch unless we measure it. The Big Bang itself has no meaning unless there's a living being here to give it one. In this worldview, the universe doesn't create life through blind chemistry. Life creates the universe by interpreting it into existence. Reality isn't external. It's participatory. Your brain doesn't just record the world. It projects it. You are not a spectator in the cosmos. You are the lens through which the cosmos becomes real. And the most terrifying implication? Without consciousness, there might be nothing. Imagine being told your thoughts don't float in a pre-built universe, but that the stars, the galaxies, the very laws of nature are code that assembles only when you look. You aren't small, you're central. But it's not ego-affirming. It's destabilizing. Because it means reality has no bottom floor, no solidity, just a shifting canvas painted by every living thing that observes it. And the moment you stop observing, it stops too. Biocentric universe theory doesn't ask what life is doing in the universe. It asks, what is the universe doing in life? And the answer it offers is unsettling, beautiful, and dizzying all at once. That life isn't just meaningful. It's the only thing that ever was. Everything else is scaffolding built from the mind outward. Not from atoms up, but from awareness down. Nihilistic Stoicism. Nihilistic Stoicism is the cold, clear belief that nothing matters, and that's exactly why you must master yourself. It is the merging of two seemingly opposing forces, the cosmic indifference of nihilism and the disciplined clarity of Stoicism. It begins with the abyss. There is no inherent meaning in life, no divine justice, no karmic balance, no guarantee that anything you do will matter in the end. The universe is silent. History forgets. The grave swallows all. And yet, within that void, something ancient awakens. Not despair, but control. Not emotion, but equanimity. Nihilistic Stoicism doesn't deny the emptiness. It walks straight into it and chooses to stand tall anyway. If nothing matters, then the only thing left is how you carry yourself in the face of that truth. You become the author of your posture, your principles, your reactions, not because they will change the world, but because they are all you have. This philosophy strips away hope like dead skin. It removes the comforts of destiny and cosmic reward. There is no plan. No, everything happens for a reason. There is only this moment, this breath, this choice. And from that place of absolute freedom comes terrifying responsibility. You don't get to hide behind meaning. You don't get to blame God, fate, or the stars. You must decide who to be in a universe that does not care. Nihilistic Stoicism is not about emotionlessness. It's about restraint in the face of meaninglessness. You feel the pain. You acknowledge the chaos. And then you choose your response like a blade forged in fire. Anger becomes noise. Fear becomes background static. Pleasure loses its grip. What remains is presence, sharp, detached, unflinching. You don't endure because things will get better. You endure because endurance itself becomes the only noble act left in a world without gods. And there's power in that. If nothing matters, you can't lose anything real. If meaning is an illusion, then disappointment loses its teeth. If no one is watching, then your honor is your own. The nihilist collapses into despair. The Stoic clings to virtue. But the nihilistic Stoic sees through both illusions and chooses anyway. Not for reward, not for applause, just to prove, perhaps to no one, that even in a meaningless world, a human being can still walk through fire without blinking. Ontological rebellion. Ontological rebellion is the fierce, defiant belief that existence itself is an insult, and that the only honest response to being is revolt. Not against a government, not against a system, but against the fact of being alive at all. It is the scream against the birth certificate, the quiet refusal to accept that just because one exists, one must participate. This is not depression. This is not despair. This is philosophical warfare against reality itself, a refusal to go quietly into the roles, identities, and purposes the universe silently assigned at birth. This philosophy begins with the most primal question: who asked for this? And it refuses every answer. God? Nature? Evolution? Fate? All rejected. It does not see life as a gift. It sees it as an obligation wrapped in pretense. You are thrown into a body, a family, a culture, a history you did not choose. You are told to be grateful, to make the most of it. But ontological rebellion cuts through the noise and says, no, I did not consent to this stage. I will not perform the script written for me. It is not about suicide. It is about symbolic non-compliance. It is the refusal to become what the world wants. The refusal to play the game just because it's already started. Imagine waking up in a prison where everyone tells you, this is life, be happy. And instead of decorating your cell, you start tearing the walls down. Ontological rebellion is not escapism. It is confrontation. It questions the ground beneath existence. It throws fire at the demand to be someone. It doesn't want a better life. It wants revenge on being. Every time someone says, this is just the way things are, ontological rebellion sharpens its blade. It denies identity as destiny. It denies progress as salvation. It denies meaning as comfort. It does not seek peace. It seeks clarity through rupture. If the world wants obedience, it will offer silence. If the world wants legacy, it will leave no trace. If the world wants acceptance, it will offer only a smirk and a turned back. This is not nihilism. This is a protest at the level of being, a refusal so deep it echoes beyond language. Not to end the world, but to say, in a voice the void cannot ignore, I was thrown here without consent, and I will not thank you for it. Radical empirical skepticism. Radical empirical skepticism is the razor-edged belief that nothing you experience can be trusted, not your senses, not your thoughts, not even the fact that you are experiencing anything at all. It is not ordinary doubt. It is not careful questioning. It is existential rejection of the very foundation upon which all knowledge rests, the assumption that experience corresponds to anything real. This philosophy doesn't say, you might be wrong. It says, you are probably hallucinating, and always have been. In this view, sight is deception. Sound is a glitch. Touch is a delayed signal you mistake for presence. The world you walk through, trees, people, language, time, is a theater staged by nervous systems that cannot prove they are connected to anything beyond themselves. Reality becomes a simulation without a source code, not because there is a hidden truth you haven't found yet, but because there may not be one at all. You are not misinterpreting the world. You are possibly inventing it from fragments of noise, stitched into order by a brain desperate for pattern and purpose. Radical empirical skepticism goes deeper than solipsism. It doesn't just question if others exist. It questions if you do. It interrogates every memory, every assumption of continuity. How do you know you were awake an hour ago? How do you know time flows forward? How do you know the body you feel is even yours? This isn't paranoia. It's lucidity without a handrail. A state of hyper-awareness in which every claim collapses under the weight of its own unprovable origins. And what's left in that collapse? Not clarity, not peace, just raw perception without anchor. The color red becomes a shapeless pulse. Your reflection in the mirror becomes a stranger blinking on delay. The voice in your head starts to sound less like a narrator and more like a phantom echoing inside a black box you'll never open. Radical empirical skepticism is not a path to enlightenment. It's a plunge into the vertigo of consciousness, stripped of trust, logic, and evidence. You can still speak, but every word might be a lie. You can still look, but every shape might be an error. The horror is not that nothing is real. The horror is that you will never know if anything is real, and your deepest feeling of certainty might be the most sophisticated hallucination of all. Anti-epistemology. Anti-epistemology is the radical and unsettling belief that the entire pursuit of knowledge is a trap, not just flawed, but fundamentally impossible, corrosive, and perhaps even dangerous. It rejects the very idea that truth can be discovered, understood, or meaningfully shared. In this philosophy, knowing is not a noble act. It is a power play, a performance, a ritual designed to create the illusion of certainty in a world that is built on flux, contradiction, and chaos. Anti-epistemology doesn't just question what we know. It questions why we ever believed we could know anything at all. It begins with the observation that knowledge systems are always structured by something: language, culture, perception, logic, and that each of these is a human construct, deeply biased, historically shaped, and impossibly incomplete. If everything we know passes through a filter we can't escape, then what we call knowledge is really just agreement within a hallucination. Anti-epistemology goes further. It says the entire obsession with truth is a distraction from the raw experience of being, that the pursuit of knowledge doesn't bring us closer to reality, it pushes us further from it. Imagine a world where the more you study, the less you understand, where every answer reveals 5 more lies hidden beneath it, where knowledge doesn't build, it collapses in on itself, revealing a hollow structure of symbols pointing only to other symbols. Anti-epistemology claims that what we call education may be indoctrination, that science may be a language game, that history may be mythology with citations, that logic itself may be an aesthetic preference we've mistaken for divine order. And here lies the darkest twist. The more convinced you are that you know something, the further you drift from truth. Certainty becomes a form of blindness. Expertise becomes a costume. Wisdom becomes a cage. Anti-epistemology teaches that the world is not made to be understood. It is made to be felt, endured, navigated, survived. Not decoded, not explained, just lived. This philosophy doesn't offer better knowledge. It rejects the need for knowledge altogether. It asks what kind of freedom becomes possible when we finally admit that truth is a shadow, knowledge is theater, and the obsession with understanding has always been a form of fear dressed up as progress.